A gentleman enters the maze, and never walks out alive. Welcome to Agent Ash. I am your host, Hallow. Comment below. Where are you tuning in from today? Hearing from you makes every story feel alive. It was on the morning of the 13th of June that I first heard of the affair in the maze. The news came to me not by the sober and careful channel of the morning paper, but by the altogether more dramatic means of Mrs. Cavendish, our formidable neighbour, pushing open my garden gate with the air of a woman carrying civilization-shattering tidings. She was a woman of advanced years, yet she managed to convey urgency with every step, as if the gravel itself ought to clear the way for her. "You've not heard?" she demanded, dispensing with any form of greeting. "Of what precisely?" I asked, lowering the Times and bracing myself. "Of the death. Oh, they are calling it an accident for the moment. But between you and me, it's no such thing. Of Sir Charles Allonby. Found dead, in the middle of the hedge maze at Graythorne Hall, not 2 hours ago." The words struck me as peculiarly theatrical, yet Mrs. Cavendish was not in the habit of inventing deaths for effect. Graythorne Hall, the country estate of Lady Helena Allonby, was the social pinnacle of our district, and the Allonbys, old money, impeccable breeding, were spoken of with the sort of hushed awe reserved for historical landmarks. By luncheon, more details had filtered through the vine-like network of rural communication. Sir Charles had been discovered face down in the gravel path at the very heart of the maze, a place difficult to reach unless one knew the precise turns to take. He had gone out after breakfast, ostensibly to enjoy the June morning. An hour later, a gardener's boy, sent to fetch him for a visitor, had found him lying there, quite lifeless. The local doctor had been summoned, declaring death sudden and probably cardiac, though, as several ladies in the village noted, Sir Charles had been seen at the hunt ball a week prior, ruddy-cheeked and full of energy. It was, of course, only a matter of time before the name of Hercule Poirot entered the conversation. Lady Helena was said to be in a state, and had telephoned London before the doctor's words were cold. By the following morning, Poirot himself was to arrive on the 10:15 from Paddington. I happened to be at the station when the train drew in, and I confess there was something reassuringly inevitable about seeing the small, dapper figure step down, immaculate as ever in his grey suit, his moustaches faultlessly waxed and glinting in the summer light. He carried no more than a small valise, but one felt, irrationally perhaps, that he had brought with him the full resources of order, reason, and justice. "Ah, mon ami," he greeted me, for we had met on more than one occasion in past matters. "I see it in your eyes. You have already heard of this. Pauvre gentleman, who has chosen to die in the middle of a puzzle." "I don't suppose you believe it was by choice?" I ventured. Poirot's eyebrows rose. "In life, my friend, very few people choose the exact place and moment of their death. But if one is found in the centre of a maze, then already it is not chance but arrangement. And arrangement," here he tapped one finger meaningfully against his temple, "is always the work of the human brain, for good or for evil." At Graythorne Hall, the atmosphere was thick with that peculiar blend of shock and calculation one finds in great houses when the master is suddenly removed. Lady Helena, a tall and frostily elegant woman, received Poirot in the drawing-room, her eyes red-rimmed, yet her voice controlled. Around her, like figures in a tableau, stood the other residents and guests of the hall. There was Major Fitzroy, the retired military man and old friend of Sir Charles, his manner bluff but his eyes darting. Miss Lydia Harper, Lady Helena's young companion, with a calm face but tightly clasped hands. Mr. Gordon Reeves, the estate's legal adviser, thin and precise, and a Mr. Basil Corwin, a cousin visiting from London, whose flippant air seemed at odds with the occasion. The servants, I gathered, had been kept out of view for the moment. Lady Helena's account was simple enough. Sir Charles had breakfasted alone. She had been feeling unwell, and had taken a tray in her room. Afterward, he had mentioned taking a turn in the garden before meeting Mr. Reeves to discuss certain estate matters. At 11 o'clock, the boy had found him in the maze. There had been no sign of struggle. His watch had stopped at 10:42. Poirot listened in silence, his head inclined, eyes flicking from one face to another, as though noting the slightest twitch or glance. When Lady Helena concluded, he asked only one question. "Madame, tell me, was Sir Charles in the habit of walking in the maze?" Her answer, after the briefest pause, was no. In fact, he disliked it. He said it was unnerving. Poirot's eyes half closed, and a faint smile touched his lips. "Then we have already our first curiosity," he murmured. We moved at once from the drawing-room to a small morning-room that looked over the Italian terrace. The French windows were open upon a sweep of lawn, and beyond it, some 50 yards away, the green walls of the maze rose with an oddly menacing neatness, their clipped lines too precise to be innocent. Poirot paused a moment on the threshold, breathed in, and then, with that familiar fastidiousness of his, adjusted a cushion on an armchair before inviting Lady Helena to sit. It was not comfort he sought so much as order, to place each person where he might observe them against a calm background. "You will forgive me," he said gently, "if I ask that we speak one by one for a few minutes only. It is not the formal interrogation. It is merely to arrange in my mind the little facts. Later we shall go to the maze together. Ah, not all of us. Only I, perhaps, and our friend here. For the present, we will remain with what is human and immediate." Lady Helena inclined her head. Up close, her beauty had a severity that might have been carved, and her voice, when it came, was the sort that never trembles in public. She recounted once more the plain chronology, her indisposition at breakfast, Sir Charles's solitary meal, his remark about the garden, the appointment with Mr. Reeves, the discovery by the boy. Poirot's questions were simple, but they probed with the delicacy of a pin. "Madame, the maze, since you say your husband disliked it, was it locked?" "Number. It is not a thing one locks, Monsieur Poirot. Yet there is an entrance. One comes and one goes." "There are two," put in Major Fitzroy, who had drifted closer, as men of action do when they can be of no action. "North and south. One from the terrace end, one from the rose walk." Lady Helena's eyes tightened almost imperceptibly. "Major," she said, "Monsieur Poirot wishes to hear from me." Fitzroy flushed, muttered an apology, and subsided, but Poirot, far from being offended, gave a small, courteous bow in his direction. "Your exactitude will be valuable in its turn, Major. Madame, two entrances not locked. And was Sir Charles, how shall I say, concerned with secrecy these last days? Any matter pressing on his mind?" Her hands, which had lain quietly in her lap, did not stir. There were always matters pressing on Charles's mind. He took his responsibilities seriously. He was thorough. Mr. Reeves, the legal adviser, cleared his throat. "If I may, Lady Helena, there was the question of the quarry lease." "Later, Mr. Reeves," she said, without looking at him. "Monsieur Poirot asked me." Poirot's gaze travelled unobtrusively from face to face. If there was a flicker of impatience in any of them, it did not escape him. "Then we will come to each in turn," he said. "Mr. Reeves, you had a meeting at what hour?" 11, Reeves answered, clasping and unclasping long fingers. "In Sir Charles's study. He did not arrive. When the boy brought the news, I went at once to fetch Lady Helena." "And you, Major Fitzroy, how did you pass the morning?" "In the gun-room for a time," the Major said, looking squarely back. "Cataloguing. After breakfast, Corwin and I, Basil Corwin, were to take a look at the West Spinney to see why the pheasants are keeping to cover. He did not appear. I supposed he had been delayed." "Delayed by what?" Basil Corwin asked lightly, from the doorway. He had wandered in with the air of a man at a theatre who likes to change seats for a better view. I was ready at 10:30. Then I was told my cousin had gone to the garden. I waited a little and then went down the drive to smoke. Not, I acknowledge, a strenuous morning. Poirot inclined his head. And Miss Harper? Lydia Harper, pale, self-contained, had the sort of calm that can be discipline or indifference. I read to Lady Helena for an hour, she said. After that, I took correspondence down to the village post. I returned at 11:15 and met the gardener's boy running. You did not enter the maze? Poirot asked. No. Nor yesterday, nor the day before? She hesitated, and that hesitation interested Poirot. I went in last week, she said at last, for a few minutes. It is a curiosity, after all. He let it rest there. There is also the staff, he said, turning to Lady Helena. I will not trouble them at this moment, but I should like the butler, the head gardener, and the boy who made the discovery to be ready presently to answer a few questions. Lady Helena rose with a small, contained sigh. Of course. She touched the bell. While we waited, Poirot moved to the open windows and stood a moment looking out. The lawn was a perfect sward, broken only by a straight gravel path drawn like a line towards the maze's nearest entrance, a green mouth without expression. It is curious, he said softly, how the English love their puzzles. You keep them in the garden, you keep them in the heart. The butler, Dobson, appeared first, discreet, middle-aged, correct. To him, Poirot addressed only practical matters. What time had Sir Charles breakfasted? Who had seen him last? What was the custom of the household of a morning? Dobson's answers were crisp and unrevealing. Breakfast at 9, with the master alone, coffee carried at 9:30 to Lady Helena's room by the maid. Sir Charles had rung at 9:15 for the post, had received 2 letters and a telegram. He had gone out a little after 9:30 by the terrace doors. A telegram? Poirot repeated. And what became of it? In Sir Charles's study, sir. Mr. Reeves may have seen it. It concerned the quarry lease. Reeves coughed again, a small proprietary sound. The quarry, he said, as if the word might establish his importance. A renewal, more money to be made than the previous contract, but certain conditions concerning right-of-way were... Poirot's hand floated, gentle and firm. We will examine the papers together, if you please. The head gardener. Jarvis, the head gardener, arrived in his turn, cap in hand but pride in every line. He did not love the maze, he confided. Too difficult to keep it was without gaps showing. Hedges have a will of their own. The master liked his borders and his roses, Jarvis said. The maze was more of Lady Helena's father's fancy. Sir Charles didn't go in much. Said it put his teeth on edge. You were at work this morning near the maze? On the south side, sir, thinning the box by the rose walk. I saw the master go in by the terrace entrance at... Well, there's the quarter chime. From the church just then, I'd say about 9:30. He had his stick. He didn't look my way. And no one else? Poirot asked. Jarvis's eyes slid, then returned. People go in and out, sir. The young lady, Miss Harper, went in the other day. This morning. He stopped, frowning. This morning, I saw Mr. Corwin come from the north entrance at 10 o'clock or thereabouts. He looked a bit... vexed. Basil Corwin's eyebrows shot up. My dear fellow, I took 3 turns to see if I could get to the centre. A man may vex himself at bad hedge geometry. Jarvis gave a thin smile that did not like to be contradicted. Hedge geometry's the same every day, sir, unless someone's cut a door. Poirot's little bird-like head turned. Cut a door? The gardener shifted. It's a manner of speaking, sir. No doors. Only there's a panel at the far side, north and west corner, where the growth isn't what it should be. Rabbits, likely. You can see daylight if you look close. Poirot's eyes grew thoughtful. We will look very close, he said. And the boy who found Sir Charles? He came in, a shock-headed lad with quick eyes, twisting his cap in his hands. Under Poirot's soft questions, the tale came out in jerks. Dobson had sent him to fetch the master for Mr. Reeves. He had gone by the terrace because it was nearer. He had gone in, taken 3 wrong turnings. It's a beast for that, sir. Then found the open circle at the middle, and the master lying, like he'd tripped and gone down all at once. Had he cried out? Yes. Had anyone answered? He thought he heard something like a step, far away, but could not say. He had run back the way he knew, to call Jarvis, and then Jarvis had sent him for the doctor. Poirot let him go with a pat on the shoulder, and turned back to the room. The air had shifted. The invisible temperature of people listening to one another had risen a degree. Basil Corwin had moved to the mantel and was studying, with great interest, a piece of porcelain. Miss Harper's fingers had begun their slow clasping and unclasping once more. Major Fitzroy's jaw had set in that obstinate line men acquire when they have been unjustly suspected in their imagination. Mr. Reeves watched all this with the lifeless attention of a man adding columns of figures that must come out. "There is a small point," Poirot said, almost to himself. "Sir Charles takes his stick, for a walk he does not like, into a place where a stick is of little use. He carries letters, perhaps. Does he carry his watch?" "It was on his wrist," Lady Helena said. "He disliked the older style." "And it stopped at 10:42, Poirot murmured. "Why does a watch stop? Sometimes because it is old, sometimes because it is struck, sometimes because it is removed and interfered with. Sometimes," he waved a hand. "Many reasons. We do not grasp at one." He asked then for leave to see Sir Charles's study, and we crossed a wide hall with black and white marble squares that made somehow a chessboard of one's steps. The study was a masculine room, a sober desk, 2 walls of books, a plain rug, a case of rifles with their polished wood gleaming. On the blotter lay a telegram, folded. Beside it 2 letters, one opened, the other only slit. Poirot did not pounce. He stood a moment, looking not at the papers, but at the chair, pushed back a little too far, and at the ashtray, where a cigarette had been stubbed out with what I would have called irritation, had I believed furniture could feel. He touched nothing until Lady Helena gave the smallest nod. Then he read, swiftly. The telegram was indeed about the quarry lease. Terms accepted, meeting proposed. One letter bore a London club crest, and contained a request, delicately worded, for repayment of a loan long ago made and long ago forgotten in conversation. The other, in a sloped feminine hand, was from a Mrs. Barclay at the Dower House 2 miles off, asking Sir Charles to intercede with Lady Helena about an employment matter concerning a maid. None of these, I thought, would send a man to the heart of a maze to die. "It is not so simple," Poirot said, as if I had spoken. "There is the business, there is the family, there is the heart, always the heart." He turned to Reeves. "You, monsieur, when you saw that the hour had passed and Sir Charles had not come, did you look for him?" "I went along the corridor," Reeves said. "I asked Dobson. He volunteered to send the boy. I did not consider it my place to stroll through the gardens." Poirot's eyes warmed. "Number, you are precise. One does what is proper." He shifted to Major Fitzroy. "And you? You waited for Mr. Corwin in the gun-room?" "For a time," Fitzroy said. "Then I went to the West Spinney alone. At 5 to 11, I was by the copse when I heard a shout. By the time I got back, they were all off to the maze. I followed. And I," Basil Corwin said, "had grown bored with horticulture. I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, I do not enjoy hedges in theory any more than I did in practice." "But you tried the maze," Poirot said mildly. "Why?" Corwin's flippant smile hovered. "Because it was there. Because I was a boy once. Because it amuses me to find a centre and discover there is nothing in it but gravel and a sundial. Because—" He broke off and lifted his hands. "My dear man, I meant nothing. If you prefer, I went in to see whether my cousin's distaste for the place was founded upon solid grounds. Miss Harper, who had not spoken, said quietly, "The centre is peaceful sometimes, if one is not afraid of being lost." "Aha," said Poirot softly. "Fear, and the being lost." He turned to the window again and stood very still. Outside, the green plains of the maze seemed to hold their breath. A bird dropped, white and silent, from one hedge to another, and was gone. "There is a thing I require," Poirot said at last. "A plan of the maze, as it exists, not as it was designed, if such a thing exists." Jarvis, summoned, shook his head. "No plan on paper, sir. Old Mr. Montague, that was her ladyship's father. He had the thing laid out according to his fancy. We keep it by the cut and the eye." "Then we must make a plan for the little grey cells," said Poirot. "We will go presently. But first, one more small matter." He returned to the study desk, looked again at the letters, and then, with a neat fingertip, pointed to a faint smear of brown on the blotter, hardly more than a whisper. "Jarvis," he said, "do you use oil in trimming the yew?" "Not oil, sir. Sap comes when you cut. It sticks, it does." "Use sap," murmured Poirot. "It burns a little on the skin, I think. One rubs the fingers, so, and leaves a trace upon the paper. And Sir Charles disliked the maze." He stood then, quite composed, and smiled with that air he has of seeing, in imagination, the whole arrangement of a room none of us has yet entered. "Come," he said, "we will take a walk. We will not be brave, we will be methodical, and each of you will tell me, as we go, not what you think of the maze, but what the maze makes you think of. It is not the same thing." We went out onto the terrace in a little procession that had about it something of a funeral and something of a pilgrimage. The gravel crunched underfoot with the peculiar, accusing sound gravel always makes when people are uneasy. As we approached the entrance, I glanced back. Lady Helena stood at the far window, watching us. In her stillness there was nothing of despair, only a fierce attention, as if she had set a problem and would judge the solution. Poirot did not look back. He raised his cane, not as a general's baton, but as a schoolmaster's pointer, and stepped into the green mouth that had swallowed a living man and returned him, an hour and 12 minutes later by the watch, as an arrangement of stillness in the centre of its carefully plotted heart. The first turns were simple, as though the designer had wished to lull a visitor into overconfidence. A straight path ran out of the sunshine and into a cool green light, the clipped walls pressing close enough that one could smell the clean bitterness of yew. Gravels whispered underfoot. Poirot, who detests disorder but adores a system, walked with his cane touching lightly at the base of the hedge on our right, counting paces in a voice too low to carry, and at each junction dropping a fleck of torn visiting card to mark our passage. It was not the romance of Theseus. It was the accountant's thread. He would glance back, satisfied, and move on. Behind us, the little procession strung out and closed in again, according to temperament. The Major wished to be at the front, and checked himself. Mr. Reeves kept precisely 2 paces behind Poirot, and slightly to the left, as if the rule were written. Basil Corwin drifted to the side, pausing now and then to examine a clipped curve, as though it might be art after all. Miss Harper walked with downcast eyes, counting her breath, I thought. Jarvis came last of the invited, one hand hovering as if it longed for clippers. "You see," Poirot said, when the first minor loop returned us, "already there is the principle. When one cannot have the plan, one makes the plan. Neatly, always neatly." He stooped, pointed with the cane. "Here is a place newly raked. Jarvis?" "Boy did it yesterday after tea," Jarvis said, "and again this morning where there were prints." "Where there were prints," Poirot repeated, but not as a question. He examined the gravel. "A light drag, as if something is drawn the wrong way against the direction of walking. A stick, perhaps, pulled behind. But Sir Charles carried his stick forward, Jarvis tells us. His eyes lifted, bright and friendly. We do not jump. We add. We came to the first ambiguity. A fork that seemed to offer equal promise either way. Poirot chose the left-hand path, saying, "The English, they choose the left by habit. No? We indulge the habit once." At the next turn, he chose the right without explanation, and we emerged into a small square with a wooden bench against the hedge, its back stained a little darker where many shoulders had rested. Poirot's finger hovered a fraction over the wood and stopped. "The resin makes the mark," he observed. "Not fresh. It interests me only that there is no ash. If one sits and smokes here, one taps, one forgets." His glance slid sideways to Reeves and away again so quickly that I could not be sure I had seen it. There was a deception here, one of those sly doublings the designer had enjoyed. The path from the bench did not lead on. It pretended to, then brought us round to our own heel in 3 turns. Poirot approved with a small murmur and set us back to the fork, where he took the right-hand path. At the next corner, he paused, crouched, and with the end of his cane flicked something almost invisible from the base of the hedge. A thread, no more than a 1/4 inch, pale and lustreless, caught where a twig had broken. "It is perhaps nothing," he said, and held it out on his fingertip. "A thread from a cuff. See how dull it is. This is not silk, it is cotton. White cotton is the friend of cleanliness, and of people who like to be unseen." He let the breeze take it and stood. We proceed. The maze tightened. The hedges here grew higher by an inch or two, or seemed to, because the path narrowed, and the air had the peculiar quiet of a room with a door almost shut. Somewhere to our right, a bird chattered, and the sound came to us over green and small. Poirot counted again, under his breath. At the 9th count he stopped and tapped the hedge. "Jarvis, your panel." Jarvis came up, unwilling and practical. I said it. "Weren't right, sir. There's a looseness here. Look, if you push with your hand, there." He pressed, and the hedge flexed, not in the living way of a springy branch, but with the suggestion of a mat bowing. Through the leaves I saw a sliver of light, day beyond darkness. "Rabbits?" Basil Corwin suggested, all innocence. "Or foxes. Ungentlemanly animals seldom obey the laws of horticulture." "Animals are perfectly gentlemanly," Jarvis said, affronted. "They don't cut you and weave it back. This has been meddled with, sir, but not by me." Poirot tested the place delicately, not pushing but feeling the resistance. He looked at the ground just there and followed some thought we could not see. "It is not a door," he said. "It is an idea of a door. It allows not the passage of a large man without trouble, but of the hand easily. On the other side, Jarvis? Another path runs close, the North Walk. And the time," Poirot said, not looking at his watch, "at which Mr. Corwin came out by the north entrance was near 10. Basil lifted his hands. "My dear sir, you cannot suppose I crawled through the hedges. My vanity, if nothing else, would object." "Vanity is the great alibi," Poirot said amiably. "Let us be vain together. Another time." He made a small sign with his cane and moved on. The panel, if a panel it was left as found. He would not disturb the order until he had its meaning. We negotiated 2 long straight runs, a false centre with a pretty quatrefoil of gravel, at which Corwin said, "Ah, the sundial," and then, finding none, smiled and shrugged, and then, with a turn that felt intuitively wrong and therefore must be right, came to the true heart of the maze. It was a circle of perhaps 12 feet across, bounded by hedge clipped inward at a gentle concavity, so that the place felt like a bowl. In the exact centre stood a low octagonal stone set with a small brass plate, engraved not with a sundial's gnomon, but with a simple compass rose, and the date of the maze's laying. The gravel had been disturbed in a large oval, where, I knew, the body had lain. There was the faint memory of a darker patch that the sun had begun to erase. I could not help the felt absence of the man. One thinks, absurdly, that the echo of a weight should hover. Poirot said nothing for a long moment. He walked not into the disturbed place, but around its edge with his neat, short steps, head tilted a fraction, the way he stands when listening to music he knows too well. He looked at the brass plate, at the inner faces of the hedge, at the gravel. He stooped once with that precise inevitability of his, and picked up a small thing between thumb and forefinger and put it into his pocket without comment. When he straightened, he spoke in the mild tone that means he is watching people rather than the ground. Each of you, tell me now, quickly, the first thought when you see this place. The foolishness of it, said Reeves almost at once. A centre that is no centre, a waste of capital and labour. The discipline, said Major Fitzroy surprisingly, training a thing to a shape. The quiet, said Miss Harper. It is as if the house stops here. The joke, said Basil Corwin, because a man arrives at the middle of something and finds there is nothing to do but go out again. The work, said Jarvis. The cut must be clean here, or it shows. Poirot nodded to each in turn, as if taking the measure not of what they said, but of the rhythm of their saying. He stepped back to the brass plate, bent close, and delicately touched the rim with his little finger. Jarvis, he said, almost casually, have you polished this plate recently? Saturday, sir. Evening. It spots if you don't. There is here a faint scratch, very fine, at the west point, Poirot said. One makes such a mark with a metal edge, perhaps a watch clasp, if one leans and puts the hand down. It is not important, unless it is. You see, the hour, 10:42, is not far from the time when the sun is already high. One shields one's eyes with the hand, one leans, one touches, one stops the watch by accident. Many possibilities. He lifted the cane, and for the first time the point of it touched the oval of disturbed gravel. One sees also that the marks of a stick are not here. Our Sir Charles, who came with his stick, did not die with it in his hand. The stick, Reeves repeated. Was it not found? Jarvis shook his head. No stick with the master, sir. I looked for it. Thought he'd dropped it. Couldn't see it. Ah, said Poirot softly, as though a very small bell had rung. Then someone has it. That is a thing with which one can make the drag that smooths the gravel, if one wishes to be tidy. We must ask all the world about sticks. He turned to the Major. You, monsieur, you have a walking stick. Fitzroy's jaw set. A heavy one with a silver knob. It is in the gun-room. Anyone may see it. And you, Mr. Corwin? I carry a stick when I'm in town, Basil said lightly again. Country air props me up without assistance. Mr. Reeves? I have no such affectation, Reeves said, dry. And Miss Harper does not trouble with a stick, Poirot said. Good. We add, we do not conclude. He made a small circle of the space again and came to a halt where the hedge curved closest. With a fingertip, he touched an inner twig that showed a clean, bright cut. Trimmed yesterday, Jarvis said at once. I kept it neat Saturday, but there's always a bit that puts out. The boy snipped that just after breakfast. Poirot inclined his head. It is a comfort to know that something in this matter is as it ought to be. Now, let us go by the north way. The north way proved more cramped, the turns sharper, as though the maze's temperament changed. With the compass. After 2 angles, Poirot stopped again and, with the same neat flick of his cane, lifted from the gravel a sliver of pale blue paper no larger than a fingernail. He looked at it, did not show it, and placed it with the other small thing in his pocket. If anyone noticed, no one spoke. There was a quality in him then that forbade interruption. At the point where the path ran closest to the panel we had tested from the southwest, Poirot laid the cane along the base of the hedge and gently pressed the gravel with the toe of his shoe. A faint track there showed where something long and slim had been pulled through, leaving the neatest of signatures, a shallow, obedient line. "One could reach," he said to me, very low, "from this side to that, and pass a small object through, to a hand prepared. It is a game one plays with a child who is on the other side of a fence. Tiens, prens. And then, merci. It is a game only two people play when they think the world is not looking." He straightened and his voice returned to its conversational warmth. "We will not spoil Jarvis's hedge. We will remember it." The north entrance gave at last upon the rose walk, where the scent came rich and sudden as a door opening upon a full room. Basil Corwin stepped out with an air of relief that was either genuine or very good amateur theatricals. Reeves blinked as if the light were an affront that came irregularly and therefore could be sued. Miss Harper's shoulders loosened almost imperceptibly. "You see," Basil said, turning with a half-smile, "I came out here at 10. No secret exits, no crawling. The hedge would have ruined my jacket, and my tailor would never forgive me." "I can rely on the tailor," Poirot said gravely. "He is a man who keeps accounts." He looked to Jarvis. "Which path runs closest on the other side of that looseness?" "The west ring," Jarvis said. "You could pass a hand through if you knew where to aim." Poirot nodded. "We aim better when we have practiced." He tapped his cane once on the rose-walk gravel. "Now, I would like to see the boy again, and the gardener's tools, cutters, oil, the rag you use. Also, Dobson, if you please. And Major, we will go to your gun-room later. Not for the guns, for the sticks." He set off towards the terrace with that brisk little step that is almost comic until one has seen what it leaves behind. On the way, his head turned slightly, exactly as it had turned in the study, as if he had heard some inaudible thing. "There is a romance in English gardens," he said, to no one in particular. "They pretend that the heart is geometry, but always there is the place where one reaches through." We were nearly to the house when Lady Helena stepped out again to meet us. Her eyes asked the question she did not permit her lips. Poirot's bow was as courteous as it had been an hour earlier, but I thought I saw for an instant a gravity in him, deeper than before. "Madame," he said, "we have made the promenade. We have seen something very small and something not so small. I ask that no one leave the house today. It is a request only. I do not command. But—" he lifted 2 fingers. "It is better for the ordre." "Of course," she said, "whatever you require." "There is only one thing I require now," Poirot added, and his tone became almost playful, which with him is a warning, not a relaxation. "The stick with which Sir Charles did not return from his walk." "His stick?" she repeated, surprised. "He had an ash plant he favoured. I have not seen it since." "Neither have we," Poirot said. "It is an absence that is too tidy. Sometimes it is the absence that speaks." And in that moment, as we turned towards the cool of the hall, Dobson appeared at the far end, bearing on a salver with excessive propriety a dark polished walking stick with an ivory ferrule. "Begging pardon, my lady," he said. "This was found just now by the second footman in the small cloakroom off the north passage. We thought Monsieur Poirot might wish to see it." Poirot's eyes went to the ferrule, to the faint smear along its length that a less tidy man might have missed, and in his face there flickered, not triumph, nothing so crude, but the exact confirmation of a piece in a game finding its rightful square. He did not touch the stick at once. He looked instead at the faces, one by one, and then he smiled in that quiet way of his that says the first false picture has been hung in the gallery, ready to be admired by those who like to be deceived. Dobson advanced with the salver as though bearing a relic. Poirot looked not at the whole, but at the parts, The ivory ferrule, a little stained where the hand rests, the shaft dark with use, the tiny nick halfway up that makes a familiar object the property of one man and no other. Only then did he reach and take it, holding it with his handkerchief between finger and thumb, tilting it minutely to the light. "An ash plant, yes," he said. "The friend fidèle. Madame, Sir Charles kept this where?" "In the stand in the hall," Lady Helena answered. "He did not lock it away." "And the small cloakroom off the north passage, who uses it?" "Guests coming in from the Rose Walk," Dobson supplied. "It is convenient to the north door, sir. Hats and sticks. One may wash one's hands." Poirot's eyes rested on Dobson a fraction longer than courtesy required. "And at what hour was the cloakroom last cleaned?" "This morning after breakfast, sir. Fuller, second footman, wiped the marble and replaced the towels." "Then this," Poirot lifted the stick a little, "has been placed there since that time." Basil Corwen's laugh was too light. "Really, a stick is like a cat in these houses. It wanders of its own accord." "Cats return," Poirot murmured. "Sticks seldom do unless someone leads them home. Jarvis, your opinion, if you please." He held the ferrule towards the gardener. Jarvis peered, reluctant to be important and unable to help it. "That smear along the length," Jarvis said, slow. "Yellowish when it catches. Could be yew sap if a man had pushed the stick in against the hedge where it's cut. It's not oil from clippers. That would be sharper and leave a scent." Poirot lifted the ferrule to his own nose, delicate as a taster at a dinner. "A scent there is, faint. Not the machine oil of the gun-room, not the linseed of a good rag. Something clean, soap, and under it, yes, the bitterness of yew. So one has rubbed it after one has made it dirty. That is very English." He lowered the stick and smiled, benign. "We will go to the cloakroom." The room in question was little more than a recess panelled in old oak, a narrow window of thick glass giving a softened light, a row of hooks, a stand for umbrellas, and a marble slab with a blue and white basin. Poirot set the stick carefully where Dobson had had it, and stood very still, looking at the way the wood of the stand shone a degree more on one rung, where a habit had made a polish, at a faint crescent on the marble where a ring had been laid and forgotten, and relaid so often that the stone remembered its shape, at the grain of the towels. "Fuller," Poirot said, and Dobson summoned him. A thin youth with ears that had not yet understood they were too large, presented himself with the misery of the conscientious poor. "You cleaned here," Poirot said kindly. "Tell me, when you placed the towels, were there already any marks on the slab?" "No, sir. I wiped it till it showed half myself and half the window." "And since then, who has used it?" "Couldn't say, sir. Only I put the soap dish straight just now. Someone had moved it along." Poirot's eyes dropped to the soap. He lifted it with his handkerchief. The underside showed a single perfect crescent, an ivory edge perhaps, pressed and lifted before the soap had quite dried. He replaced it exactly, his expression mild. "You see," he said, as much to the light as to us, "a man comes in from the garden by the north. He washes his hands very clean. Then he remembers, the stick. He has in his hand something that has what Jarvis calls the bitter on it. He rubs it with soap because English gentlemen do not like stickiness. He puts the stick in the stand. He goes away. Does he hang up his hat? No, there is no hat. He has come from the garden, not from the drive." "Which might be any of us," Reeves observed. His tone made it a verdict. "It is a generous circle," Poirot agreed. "We will narrow it with tiny things." At that moment there came the inevitable intrusion of authority. A sharp bell pealed. A murmur travelled. A uniformed sergeant appeared at the far door, and behind him a man with a ruddy, well-brushed face and the comfortable assurance of the county constabulary, who introduced himself as Inspector Kershaw. He was respectful without subservience to Lady Helena. To Poirot He was politely curious. "You'll have your methods, Mr. Poirot," he said, when the formalities were past. "But there's a plain line to see. The doctor says heart failure. Looks that way to me. And yet there's this. Mr. Corwin here was seen coming from the north entrance around 10 by the gardener. The deceased disliked the maze, yet he went in. Odd, that. This stick of his turns up by the north door, and it's got marks of the hedge on it. If I were a betting man, I'd say Mr. Corwin and Sir Charles went in together. Had a bit of a set-to, perhaps. Family matters, leases and such. I'm told there's money on the table. And then Mr. Corwin comes out the north side. Sir Charles goes on to the middle and drops with his weak heart. Neat, you'll say. Not everything is murder." Basil's laugh had a crack in it now. "My dear Inspector, you elevate me into a plotter. I never saw my cousin this morning. And as for leases, I don't lease quarries. I spend money I haven't got, and then charm it back." Kershaw's eye took in Basil's neat tie, his easy stance. "So I gather." Poirot's head bent, as if in agreement, then lifted. "It is, as you say, very neat, Inspector. It is always the neatness I distrust. See, if Mr. Corwin wished to appear unconnected to the centre of the maze, he would not come out by the north entrance at 10. It is to call, 'See me, I am here.' Also, if he had drawn the stick along the gravel to make it smooth, he would not then place the same stick here to be admired. That is the act of someone who does not think of sticks, but of what sticks to them." He tapped the ferrule with a delicate nail. "Soap, perhaps, or another small thing." Kershaw accepted the reproof, like a man who had put a coin on the wrong horse and could afford it. "You'll say your piece. I'll talk to the servants." Poirot returned to the hall with that air of settling a napkin a fraction straighter at a crowded table. "We continue," he said. "Major, your gun room, if you please." The gun room was the Major's altar. Everything there had been arranged to be seen by an invisible inspecting officer. The heavy walking stick with the silver knob stood exactly mid-stand. 2 lighter canes bracketed it by height. Poirot admired sincerely, then took from the shelf the bottle of oil and lifted the rag folded beside it. He sniffed. "Turpentine and a little lemon," he said. "You like the sweet smell, Major? But do not fear. It is not this which our stick has known. You keep your pleasures to your own room." Fitzroy's mouth twitched. "I keep them where they belong." "And you were in here this morning," Poirot went on, cataloguing after breakfast. "You handled the sticks?" "The guns," Fitzroy said. "Not the sticks. I don't fuss with what isn't mine." Poirot set down the rag with the same care he had lifted it, and his eye for a moment rested on a bare space on a lower shelf, an absence shaped like a small box. He said nothing. He never asks furniture to testify before the witness has spoken. From there, he sought the study again and asked for the telegram, the letters, the blotter. He seated himself, and with that minute fastidiousness of his, placed each item to the same angle it had had when we first entered. "You will indulge me," he said to Reeves. "Tell me of the quarry lease as if I'm a child." Reeves obliged, from habit. "It is a granite outcrop on the North Acre. Sir Charles's father had leased it for 15 years. The lease was to expire next quarter. The company offers a renewal at advantageous rates, provided a cart track can be widened through the edge of Mrs. Berkeley's property, the Dower House. She is a difficult woman. Sir Charles believed Lady Helena might persuade her. And if the lease lapses," Poirot's voice was velvet, "then the company will withdraw. It is a tidy sum to lose, Mr. Poirot, but not a catastrophe." "Not a catastrophe to the estate," Poirot said, "but perhaps to a man. There is also the letter from the club friend. He requests repayment of a loan. How much?" Reeves did not like that. "A personal matter." "Everything here is a personal matter," Poirot said gently. "When a man goes into a place he dislikes, It is not business that draws him. It is a person, or a thing that is like a person to him. Money can be such a thing. He touched the blotter where the faint brown had shown. Sir Charles had you on his fingers before he went to the maze. He did not rub sap in the centre. Then he touched paper here. Why? Reeves looked at the blotter as if it had betrayed him. He always went out by the terrace after reading his letters. He might have stood by the open window. The yew borders are quite near. No, said Poirot, so softly it was almost affectionate. He did not brush a border with his hand like a boy. The sap is on the finger, and the thumb, here and here. It is the touch of a man who presses into the green, not past it. He made himself ready for the maze before he left the room. Miss Harper was at the door then, a ghost of a presence. Lady Helena asks if you would take tea in the library, she said. She had the air of a person who has done that same service 15 times. It was as if a thread ran from her hand to the bell. In one moment, said Poirot. Mademoiselle, may I trouble you with a question that is nothing? The paper upon which you write for Lady Helena, it is of a pale blue. Her eyes lifted startled, then settled again. Sometimes, she said, for personal notes. For accounts we use cream. Why? Because, Poirot replied, almost to himself, the maze keeps its souvenirs badly. He took from his pocket the sliver he had, found on the north path, and did not show it, only let his own eyes rest on it for the space of a breath. You went to the post this morning, mademoiselle? Yes, I posted a note for Lady Helena and one of my own, if it is of interest. Everything is of interest, said Poirot. To whom did you write? She coloured a little and did not answer. He spared her. You see, I am indiscreet. Forgive me. It is the profession. We took tea because English murder, like English weather, arranges itself around the established hours. Conversation hovered, tested subjects, retreated. Inspector Kershaw asked questions with the blandness of a man who listens for the note under the note. Twice, Lady Helena's hand went to her throat when Basil's laugh came too loudly. Reeves had the air of a ledger closing over a column that balances at last. Major Fitzroy watched the doorway, not because he wanted to leave, but because men who have seen action sit where they can see their exits. Miss Harper poured as if the stream of amber were the only true thing in the afternoon. When it was done, Poirot asked that Dobson show him the contents of the hall stand. Gloves, scarves, oddments. Dobson, dutiful, produced a tray with that faint smell of sun-warmed wool. Poirot's hand moved once, as though choosing an unimportant trifle, and picked up a small blue ticket stub. The kind one tears when one sends a telegram from the village office and keeps the counterfoil for one's own record. He held it and did not need to read the penciled time. His eyes had already. 10:20, he said, to me only. So, someone sent a telegram at 10:20 and has since come and gone from the north door. Sir Charles also received a telegram, I said, remembering. Just so, but this is not his colour. He slipped it back among the gloves, as if it had never left, and turned. All civility again. Inspector, you have the boy? You will ask him if the master had his gloves this morning. He will remember. Boys remember the details they envy. Kershaw grunted assent. And you, Mr. Poirot, do you envy anything? I envy, said Poirot, smiling, the people who can be untidy without disaster. He looked at the stick again where it stood, innocently restored to habit. For now, we will accept what is offered us. The stick is found in the cloakroom. Mr. Corwin is seen from the north path. The hedge has the panel. The soap remembers a ring. We will give to the world the picture it desires. A cousin, a quarrel, a heart that fails. The world will be content. You can't mean, I began. I mean, said Poirot softly, that sometimes one hangs the wrong picture to see who admires it. I will ask the inspector to speak with Mr. Corwin very plainly. Our friend will protest. Oh, with spirit, with indignation, He will go out to smoke, perhaps, at the south terrace, where he can be seen. And then, mon ami, the person who does not protest will interest me more. Because the maze is two things. It is the place one is lost, and it is the place one sees who knows the way. He turned from the stand. After dinner, we will ask the servants their little histories. There is also Mrs. Barclay at the Dower House, who writes about a maid and has a track the quarry would like. She will have the same tea at the same hour. Habit is the rope by which English crimes are led to the light. He moved away then with that small, precise step of his that makes the whole house feel an instrument brought to tune. Behind us, the stick in the cloakroom stood in its place and said nothing at all, but to a man who listens for silence, it said too much. Inspector Kershaw did as Poirot had quietly proposed, though he would have said it was his own good sense. He sent for Basil Corwin to the library, placed him on the rug before the hearth, as if to warm him, and stood with his notebook closed, hat on the table, a posture that says, "This will be short, if you make it so." Lady Helena remained, upright as a caryatid by the mantel. Reeves, out of some fastidiousness about scenes, withdrew to the far window and made a point of not listening. Miss Harper, summoned to fetch a book for Lady Helena, passed in and out again with lowered eyes and the unobtrusiveness of trained discretion. Major Fitzroy lingered in the hall ostensibly to look at a case of etchings. I sat with Poirot a little to one side, where we could see the play of expressions reflected in the glass of a cabinet. "You were observed leaving the north entrance to the maze near 10 o'clock, Kershaw began, without preface. "So I was told," Basil said with polite boredom. "I have never been more observed in my life for doing less." And where was Sir Charles at that moment? "In the maze, if one accepts the gardener's sighting of him going in at 9:30, Basil returned. "In the centre by 10:42, if one accepts his watch. Beyond that, he does not report to me." "You quarrelled?" Kershaw's voice was level. "With my cousin? We quarrelled in 1911 about whether a man can wear spats in rain and look honest. It exhausted us for the decade." Basil smiled. "You must have some basis, Inspector, for the pretty suspicion you are arranging." Kershaw's gaze did not shift. "Money, Mr. Corwin. There is talk of a loan recalled. There is a lease worth something. There is a cousin in town who enjoys more than he earns." Basil lifted his hands. "If I must be frank, Sir Charles was slow to understand that money is like water. If you try to hold it, you end up muddy. But he was never miserly with me. He told me 2 days ago that if the quarry lease renewed, he would settle a small thing between us. He was a decent man." Poirot's eyes on Lady Helena's face saw something shift, so slight it could have been the breath. She did not speak. Kershaw continued, a shade too satisfied. "Where did, you go, after you came out the north entrance?" "I walked to the rose walk," Basil said. "Found English roses behaving like English roses. And then, because there is only so much virtue a man can bear before luncheon, I went down the drive and smoked. If the gardener did not see the smoke, I apologized to his professional pride. And the ash plant in the cloakroom." Kershaw glanced at Poirot, as if to share a point. "Placed there since the room was cleaned. It carries you. It is Sir Charles's, yet it is not with the body." "Then someone else placed it," Basil returned. "I am encouraged, Inspector, to see that you have the very English gift for relocating a stick. I cannot help you." It was a good performance, and it gave the room what Poirot had predicted, something to admire or dislike according to one's hope. Reeves's shoulders eased a fraction, as if the column had balanced. Major Fitzroy's jaw set, less in condemnation than in the bracing way soldiers adopt when they disagree with civilians. Miss Harper's second passage with the book was quicker than the first. Lady Helena's eyes stayed, cool and brilliant, on Basil, as if considering an object for which she had not yet decided a shelf. Poirot rose then. with that air he has of closing a small box and placing it where he will know it again. Inspector, I leave you for a little. You will do me the kindness to continue as you think best. I will take a little air, and our friend here," he added, including me. "We shall walk as far as the Dower House, and ask of Mrs. Barclay. Nothing she is not willing to tell." We went by the north door, down the side lawn where the mower had left its tidily overlapping bands like watered silk, and along the boundary where the cart track, narrow and rutted, proposed to widen itself by the sheer force of the quarry company's desire. The roses along the walk were at that perfect hour when the scent is full and very slightly overripe. It seemed almost indecorous to carry a murder through it. Poirot, apparently inattentive, counted again under his breath the measure from hedge to hedge. At the place where the yew panel had given us its sliver of daylight, he stopped, not to push, but to look back towards the house, as if measuring who might observe a hand pass through. "You see, mon ami," he said, "the panel is a child's magic, open and shut, and only the two who know they laugh. If one wished to give to Sir Charles a little message, or to take from him a little paper, tiens, prends, one would choose a place where the hedge kisses the other hedge. Miss Harper says she went last week for a few minutes. The few minutes matter in England more than the hours. You suspect Miss Harper?" I asked, remembering the pale sliver of blue he had pocketed. "I suspect that she knows how not to be seen," Poirot replied. "That is not the same thing as guilt. Also, she writes upon a certain paper. But, wait, we do not make the soup from one onion." Mrs. Barclay's dower house sat in a square of shade among beeches that had no patience for the sun's bright opinions. She was a neat woman of 50, with the self-possession of those who have learned that a widow's competence is more remarked upon than her sorrow. She received us without fluster, her eyes registering Poirot's name and placing it on a shelf of useful things. "You will be about Sir Charles," she said, when we had sat. "I am sorry, though, I am not surprised. He worried himself into every matter like a terrier, and wore himself out. You wrote to him yesterday," Poirot said, "and it was not a question." "I did. A small matter. I have a girl, Elsie, who served at Greythorn and could not stay. I wished Lady Helena to take my word that the impertinence was not impertinence. Sir Charles promised, well, he promised he would speak to her when she had forgiven him for not agreeing more quickly about the cart track." Her mouth tightened. "I do not like machines at my hedge. It is the only hedge I have." "You did not see Sir Charles this morning?" Poirot's head was to one side, attentive. "Number, I saw no gentleman this morning," Mrs. Barclay said, with the faintest irony. "I saw a lady's hat on the boundary path at 9:45, Miss Harper's, if I am not mistaken, and I saw, nearer to 1:30, the shadow of an arm through the yew, where the Greythorn path runs closest. I thought for an instant it was children playing, until I remembered there are no children at Greythorn." She glanced at my friend, measuring how much to give. "Also, because one cannot help ears in a house, at 10:20 I sent a telegram to my sister about a cook. The office clerk told me I was second that morning. Someone from the hall had been in at 10:20. A man, he thought, by the handwriting on the form, though those boys think all decisive writing is men's." Poirot's eyes softened. "Your clerk is very young. Too young to know that women can write a straight line," Mrs. Barclay said. "But he will learn." "And Elsie?" Poirot's tone became even more gentle. "If it does not embarrass her, I should like a word." Mrs. Barclay rang. Elsie came, slight, with a face not made sullen by injustice, but carefully smoothed into usefulness. She looked at Poirot with the courage of those who expect not to be believed, and have decided to tell the truth regardless. "You left Greythorn," he said, "because—" "Her ladyship said I was impertinent," Elsie answered. I said only that Miss Harper did not wish to be crossed about a small thing that was no harm to anyone. It was not my place. But Sir Charles was kind. He said he would speak to my lady. I think he did. And it went worse. Mr. Reeves told Dobson I was to go that afternoon. This small thing, Poirot said, and his voice made the words a place to put a burden down. What was it? Elsie looked at Mrs. Barclay, who gave the smallest nod. Miss Harper put a note some afternoons where the gardener's boy keeps his twine, behind the shelf in the potting shed, Elsie said. I saw Mr. Corwin take one once and laugh. It was a childish laugh, sir, not mean. Another time I saw a hand through the hedge, just the fingers, and a little folded paper went and came back again. I ran away. I am not one for secrets in hedges. Poirot's gaze, so often the instrument of his vanity, became for a moment the kindest thing in the room. It was well considered to run, he said. You did not tell your lady because— I did not want Miss Harper in trouble, Elsie said simply. She has the look sometimes of a person who has done all she can and cannot do any more. And last week, Poirot went on, as if they were two friends seeing a picture together, Miss Harper went into the maze for a few minutes. You saw? I saw her go in and come out by the north, Elsie said. She was pale. Mr. Corwin was on the rose walk pretending he had been there all morning. Pretending, Mrs. Barclay repeated, with the dryness of one who cannot resist precision. My gardener says Mr. Corwin pretends very nicely. When we left, Mrs. Barclay walked us to the gate. You will not let them make a fool's ending of this, Mr. Poirot, she said in a lower voice. It is not in my affection for Sir Charles that I say it. He could be tiresome in the grand style. But foolish endings spoil the living more than they honour the dead. It is the vanity of my profession, said Poirot with a little bow, to dislike foolishness, even more than wickedness. On the path back, the shadows had drawn themselves longer, and the maze, seen at an angle from the beech shade, looked less like a design and more like a creature that sleeps with one eye open. I ventured that it seemed clear Miss Harper had played messenger between someone and someone. Between two someones, Poirot agreed. The maze is a post office where the stamp is fear. Mademoiselle carries not her own letters only. She carries for another. She is discreet. She would not risk the public road when a hedge will do. Between Miss Harper and Mr. Corwin, I said, Elsie saw him take a note. That is one line, Poirot said. It may be only the line drawn to show us where to look. Notice, Mademoiselle goes to the village at 9:45 and is seen in the maze last week. Monsieur Corwin is seen at 10 by the north. Sir Charles is at the centre at 10:42. All the minutes are busy. And there is this, Monsieur Reeves, who loves neatness, is nowhere in the garden but everywhere in the papers. It may be that he has never in his life dirtied his fingers with sap, or it may be that he has a man's dislike of stickiness and knows where the soap is. We reached the terrace as the bell for dressing rang. Somewhere in the cool interior, a discreet ripple along the spine of the house. Inspector Kershaw came out to meet us, with the look of a man who has rowed a little against the stream and found the current stronger. I've had a word with the servants, he said. No one saw Mr. Corwin with Sir Charles. Dobson swears the cloakroom was empty till near 11. The boy says the master wore no gloves. Major Fitzroy is willing to fight anyone who sighs too loud in the gun-room. Mr. Reeves is a lawyer. If you ask me, the picture hangs, but it doesn't sit straight. Then leave it crooked, Poirot advised. Crooked pictures irritate the tidy. Presently someone will put a hand to it. After dinner, which passed in that peculiar quiet where talk begins and dies, because all the words available are the wrong size, Kershaw made his formal request that Mr. Corwin remain at hand. Basil accepted with a flippancy that had lost some of its ease. Lady Helena inclined her head, as if granting a favour to the law itself. Miss Harper did not look up. Poirot asked for 5 minutes in the library, with Dobson and the housemaid who tended that room. They came, a choreography of competence. He asked little things, whether fires were laid in summer, whether letters were ever burned, whether a visitor had used the room alone this morning. The maid, after a skirtful of caution, admitted that there had been, in the grate, a faint ash of coloured paper no one claimed. She had swept it before luncheon, because ashes are not pretty. "Coloured?" Poirot said, so softly it did not reach beyond the circle of his courtesy. "Blue, sir," she said. "A nice shade, too. It stuck in the bars until I teased it with the brush." Poirot thanked her as if she had offered him a gift for which he had longed in childhood and not received. When she had gone, he stood with his hand on the mantel and looked at the empty grate as one looks at a place where once there stood a photograph of someone it is a relief not to see. "You have it now?" I asked. "I have a thread," he said, "and I have a needle. I wait for the cloth." He did not go up at once when the others went. He asked instead to see, very quietly, the boy again, the shock-headed lad who had found Sir Charles. The boy came shuffling, eager to be useful. Poirot talked to him as men talk to boys when they remember that boys are men who have not yet been allowed their illusions. He asked about the quarter chimes and whether one heard them in the maze. The boy said yes, faintly, like a clock in a pocket. He asked where the master had worn his watch. "On the left, sir, like gents do," and whether the strap had looked new. "Old, sir. The hole had a little stretch to it." He asked whether Sir Charles had worn his signet ring. "Always, sir. He tapped it on the desk when he was thinking." And then he asked, as if it were of no moment at all, whether the ring had been on the master's hand at the centre. The boy frowned, surprised to be asked for an absence. "I didn't see it, sir," he said at last, uncertain. "Begging pardon. I weren't looking at his hands. Only, well, if you ask me now, I don't remember it." Poirot let him go. When we were alone, he stood a long time without moving, and then he turned with that grave amusement he has when the game begins to show its pattern. "You see," he said, "the soap remembers a ring. The hand does not. Someone washed where the ring had been. Someone is tidy with other people's fingers." He took from his pocket the small thing he had lifted in the centre and showed it to me on his palm for a second only, a tiny bent pin of the sort that fastens a note to a lapel or a folded paper to a page. "And the maze, mon ami, is not only a place where one is lost. It is a place where one pins things in the middle so that all the ways lead to them." He closed his hand over the pin, and in the silence that followed I heard, or thought I heard, the faintest creak of a floorboard in the passage. Whoever had paused to listen went on. The house, like the maze, had its panels. The wrong picture hung, a degree awry. Somewhere, a very tidy person would not be able to resist straightening it. We did not go early to our rooms. Poirot had the air of a man arranging objects no one else could see. He moved from library to hall and back again with that neat little step of his, never in haste, never idle. Once he paused by the cloakroom, adjusted the door as if it had hung a fraction proud of the jamb, and went on. The house took a long, careful breath and settled for the night. "You will indulge me with one more conversation," he said. "Lady Helena, if she will grant us 5 minutes." She granted them. In the small morning room, lamplight, a tray where the teacups had not been cleared, she received us with that unyielding composure that might have been armour or habit. When Poirot asked, in the gentlest way imaginable, whether Sir Charles had worn his signet ring that morning, the stillness of her hands altered by a hair. "He always wore it," she said. "Always. It was his father's, a gold oval with the crest." She lifted her own left hand, then let it fall. Was heavy. "And yet it is not upon him now," Poirot said, as if considering a neutral fact in geography. "Inspector Kershaw will confirm. Forgive me. This is a thing that may be innocent. Sometimes the ring is loosened when one washes one's hands, and one does not replace it at once. Charles did not remove it, she said. Then, after an instant that was not hesitation, but the precise choice of how much to say, unless someone asked him to, for a purpose, he would do that. He liked to be agreeable in small things. Just so. Poirot's eyes softened. I ask because the soap in the cloakroom, one sees upon its underside two little memories, a crescent from the ferrule of a stick, and a faint round where a ring has been rubbed. Someone washed hands that had known the sap of yew, and someone, perhaps the same, rubbed where a ring had sat. It is my profession to notice the politeness of objects. "Do you imagine robbery?" Lady Helena asked, without outrage, merely testing the hypothesis for weight. "Number A, robbery takes what is easy to take and takes more. This takes only one thing because the one thing is what matters." He inclined his head. "You were very good, madame, to receive us at this hour. I will trouble you no more." We left her with her hands folded very exactly upon the chair arm. It occurred to me then that her calm was not absence of feeling, but a method, like the maze, a way of keeping the turns in order. In the hall, Poirot detained Dobson with a finger and a look. "The small tray in the stand with the gloves," he said. "I have admired it. There is a little ticket there that is of no consequence. I beg that it be left of no consequence. Also, the cloakroom. Let there be no cleaning until morning. And if some guest asks for a light to be left, but no. Darkness is more friendly." Merci Dobson blinked, comprehended something without presuming to say what, and inclined his head. "And now, mon ami," Poirot murmured to me, "we revere the English ritual of sitting rooms after 10. We read nothing, we say nothing, and we wait where a picture hangs a degree crooked." We waited in the library. He took a volume from the shelf, Gibbon, which he never reads, and overturned it upon his knee as if asleep behind it. I learned anew that there is an art to letting silence think. The house itself considered its problems. Boards creaked with the frankness of old wood. The distant clock remembered the quarters. Somewhere in the back passage a door touched to and fro without sound. Presently it ceased. After perhaps 25 minutes, Poirot counts without appearing to, footsteps not belonging to a servant crossed the flagged hall. They paused at the cloakroom door. A rustle, the faintest scrape of wood on wood as a hand slid along the stand. An interval, long enough for a careful person to consider a small object, and to put it somewhere it would not be found. That person, before leaving, made the odd, unthinking little movements that betray character. A picture frame on the passage wall that was not quite square became square. The umbrella stand's two tallest occupants exchanged places to satisfy a nicety of height. The marble slab of the cloakroom received an unconscious rapid swipe of a sleeve at its imagined smutch. Then the steps withdrew. Poirot did not stir. He does not pounce until the thing to be pounced upon has finished telling him what it is. When a far bell marked 11, he closed Gibbon, smoothed his cuff, and went with his tiny briskness toward the north passage. In the cloakroom, the stick stood as before. The towels were as before. The soap had been moved a finger's width and moved back. But in the tray beneath the mirror, where gloves and trifles lie until their owners remember their hands, the blue counterfoil of a telegram no longer nestled among a knitted muffler. It lay instead under the marble's edge, flattened as neatly as a pressed leaf. "It is the act of a tidy conscience," Poirot observed. "One does not destroy. Oh no, that would be to abandon order. One relocates. We will oblige it." With his handkerchief, he drew the little slip to the light again and left it exactly as before, his face composed, as if nothing in the world could be less important than a torn ticket. He did not need to say that in the reflection of the glass he had seen, when the figure bent a particular line of shoulder. I had seen a shadow only, taller than Miss Harper, shorter than the Major. But there are men and women who, when they tidy, reveal a background hum of vexed fastidiousness. No soldier, no housemaid, no light-footed cousin carries. A life with papers leaves a groove in the body. Now, Poirot said, and there was contentment in him, we will press a little upon a person who does not like to be pressed. He called softly, and Dobson, appearing like a conjured propriety, received instructions in a voice so mild that no one in the world would guess he was being made the agent of a small war. Presently, Poirot said, you will request Mr. Reeves to be so good as to bring to me in the morning a file concerning the quarry, a file which he has no reason to suppose I know of, but which I know he keeps in a blue cover with a pin like this. He showed his palm, and like a conjurer, with nothing up his sleeve, there lay the tiny bent pin he had lifted from the centre of the maze. Do not mention colour, just say, the Berkeley right-of-way correspondence, and ask him to leave it in the library before breakfast. It is a little thing. He will be very obliging. Later, when we speak to him, we will admire the pin. Dobson looked at the pin, not comprehending the conjuring, but admiring the neatness, and bowed. Very good, sir. On the stairs, we encountered Miss Harper, a shade paler than in the afternoon, and with that air of one who is in the way, if she stands, and in the way, if she passes. Poirot's bow was old world. His tone was the one he reserves for frightened courage. Mademoiselle, he said, forgive the hour. You walked this morning by the beech shade and perhaps on the boundary path. You wore a hat of straw with a black ribbon. She looked up quickly. Mrs. Barclay has been talking. She has been seeing, Poirot returned. She also hears the village clocks and the clack of the telegraph key. She says a man from the hall sent a telegram at 10:20. You went earlier and posted 2 notes. I am indiscreet, yes, but if there is a piece of truth you can spare me, you will sleep more easily for the giving. The confession, when it came, was not with heat. It was as if she had come to the end of a rehearsed part and no longer needed to repeat it. I wrote to my brother, she said. He is ill in town. The money Sir Charles promised him from the lease renewal would have set him right. I wrote to tell him I thought it would not come. Sir Charles had changed his mind about Mr. Reeves. He told me last night he would not sign anything until he had made inquiries. He asked me to place a note for Mr. Corwin this morning, an apology for having kept him at a distance. Sir Charles was fond of him, though he disapproved. I left that note where Elsie would have seen it, but she is gone. I went instead to the hedge by the boundary, because it is nearer to the rose walk, and Mr. Corwin looks where things are easy to find. Whoever took the note, I do not know if it was he. I saw only fingers. And your own letter? Poirot asked. The blue paper, it burns very prettily. Colour rose in her. She glanced away. Lady Helena prefers that personal notes be destroyed when read. I thought, after the boy cried out, that it would be kinder to burn my letter in the library. For my brother's sake, I did not wish him spoken of. And you sent no telegram? Poirot said. No. Then we keep the telegram for another hand. He looked at her for a moment, with that serious benevolence that is different from kindness. Mademoiselle, you are loyal. Loyalty is a good thing. It is also a blindfold. If you have worn it for a good reason, you may take it off now. The person for whom you carried notes through hedges will not put out a hand to save you if it will soil his cuff. She did not reply. She left us with an inclination of the head that was almost gratitude and almost exhaustion. Poirot waited until she had gone up. Then he stood at the foot of the stair, looking not at the carpet, but at the pattern it made with the runner. There is this also, he said, more to himself than to me. The cousin who laughs, he is vain and careless. He will not burn a thing he might brandish later. The Major is too blunt to pin a paper and too proud to skulk. Mademoiselle burns because she is ashamed, not because she calculates. But a lawyer, a lawyer pins, and a lawyer burns carefully between two clean coals so that the ash will not stain the grate. You think Reeves sent the telegram? I think, Poirot said, he sent two. One yesterday to urge the company to stand fast upon their condition, and one today to avert something Sir Charles had resolved upon. There is the letter from the club friend, the request for repayment. There is the lease that makes the money tidy. There is also the possibility of an account that has small irregularities. We shall not accuse, we shall admire files. We separated at last. I slept in starts and scraps. Once I woke with the image of the maze centre lit by pale dawn, the brass plate winking like an eye. When I came down at 7:30, the library door was ajar. On the table lay a blue-covered file with a neat label, Barclay, R.O.W. Correspondence, and beside it, with a punctiliousness almost affectionate, a small tin of brass paper pins. Poirot stood by the window, already dressed with that polish a valet might envy, though he has never employed one. He did not touch the file. "You observe?" he said. "The tidy man leaves his signature as if it were a compliment. He's confident. He's offended by doubt. When Inspector Kershaw arrives, we shall admire together the correspondence. We shall ask why a draft clause referring to a right-of-way appears in a hand not Sir Charles's, and why a telegram in Reeves's pocket-book is timed at 10:20, and to whom it was addressed. But for the moment, come." He led me, not to the cloakroom, not to the study, but to the north passage again. He had, sometime in the grey hour, sent a boy to the village for a sheet of tracing paper. Now he knelt. It is amusing to see him kneel, so exact and unflurried, and slid the sheet beneath the cloakroom door, so that a corner lay under the tray. "Sometimes," he said, rising, "we make a little thing visible. The person who cannot bear a small disorder will restore it, and the paper, it will carry away an impression, the faintest smudge of soap, perhaps, or the line of a ring. We do not need the smudge. We need the act." We had hardly regained the library when a call came from the far corridor, sharp, without noise. The cry, not loud, of someone who has seen something that is exactly as they wished, and not at all as they expected. Dobson appeared, grave as ever, with his composure slightly chipped. "If you please, sir," he said to Poirot, "there is something in the cloakroom that was not there last night." We went. On the marble, set as neatly as a museum label, lay a square of pale blue paper folded twice and fastened with a brass pin. Poirot looked at it as one looks at a bird that has flown, by itself, into a cage. He did not touch it at once. His eyes went to the door, to the stand, to the tray with the telegram counterfoil innocently where it had been, to the tracing paper's corner, showing, almost imperceptibly, the faintest damp curve. Then, with his handkerchief, he lifted the note and opened it. 5 words only, written in a hand that had been taught to be quiet. It was a warning. "Forgive me." Poirot held the blue square as one holds the smallest and most dangerous thing in a room. I heard, in the silence that followed, the clock far away. Mark the 7:45, and the house, like a person who has been listening politely, draw in breath to speak. Poirot did not at once call anyone. He stood with the blue square poised on his handkerchief, regarding the 5 small words, as if they were a door that opened inward only for those who knew the trick of the latch. Then he folded it again, with the exactness with which he might have wrapped a jewel, and slipped it into his pocket. "Dobson," he said quietly, "you will be so good as to mention to no one that there has been a note. We are being told a story. If we let the storyteller see our faces, he will change the ending. Thank you, Inspector Kershaw arrived on the hush of the house, like a man who wears quiet for a uniform. Poirot showed him the tracing paper's faint, damp curve, and after the smallest pause, the blue note. Kershaw read, frowned, and let the smallest puff of breath say what a better man would have spoken. "It was a warning, forgive me." "And written very neat," he observed. "Women's hand, no offence. Blue paper. Miss Harper likes blue." "Many ladies like blue," Poirot returned mild. "And some gentlemen. The hand is quiet, because it has been taught to be quiet. The note says it was a warning. That is the phrase of a person who wishes the deed to be considered prudent after the catastrophe. We will not oblige him too soon. Come, breakfast, and then we will invite the hands to write their little names." We went to the dining room together. The table, cool silver, hot porcelain, had been laid with the old house's propriety. Lady Helena took her place without looking to right or left. Basil Corwin came in with the fresh face of a man who has taken pains to sleep and to be seen to have slept. Major Fitzroy ate like a man who knows that fortitude is not improved by hunger. Miss Harper poured, as always, with that composed economy which wastes nothing. Reeves arrived last, apology in the lift of his eyebrows and a blue-covered file under his arm. "I took the liberty, Lady Helena," he said, laying it lightly on the console, "of bringing the Berkeley correspondence for Mr. Poirot. If I can be of any use to the inspector as well—" "You will be of use in your proper time," Kershaw said pleasantly. "For now, there's a small matter. The county asks that all present write and sign a brief acknowledgment of our request that you remain available. A formality." He produced 4 printed slips, name, date, and the words, "I consent to remain, if you please." It was done as such things are done in houses where the habit of consenting has been cultivated. Major Fitzroy wrote as he speaks, his letters square, his pen impatient at the curves. Basil Corwin, with a flourish he could not wholly restrain, made the simple words look like the invitation to a ball. Reeves, took the pen between long fingers and wrote as though the line itself were an argument. Miss Harper's hand was small, exact, and self-effacing. It sat on the paper, obedient, and took up no more room than had been asked for it. Lady Helena's signature was the only thing there that could not be mistaken for anyone else's. The H was a blade. Poirot watched not the lines, but the writers, and when it was done, he thanked them, as if they had made a social morning agreeable. Then he turned to the blue file with an air of a man receiving a bouquet. "You are too good, Monsieur Reeves," he said. "It is punctuality that is the soul of the legal profession. You leave also upon my table this little tin of pins. You are generous. I, who am vain, will imagine it is an homage to my little collection." He touched the lid with one fingertip. It made the smallest click. Reeves smiled without warmth. "You will find the correspondence in order. Sir Charles was methodical when induced to be so." Before Poirot could reply, the rhythm of the house altered. Jarvis came in without ceremony, hat in hand, a man whose sense of what was proper had been outrun by what was necessary. "Beg pardon, my lady," he said, half breathless. "We found something in the yew by the west-north corner, where I told the gentleman yesterday the growth weren't right. It glinted at me. Sir." He turned to Poirot. "It's the master's ring, if ever it was. Caught where a hand would go if you passed." He stopped himself from saying a little thing, and said instead, with dignity, "Anything at all." Kershaw was up in a moment. Poirot rose more slowly, as a man who has expected the bell to ring, and is pleased that it has not kept him waiting overlong. "In the hedge?" Kershaw asked. "In the hedge," Jarvis confirmed. "Just our side of the panel. There's sap on it, sticky, and a bit of something like paper stuck to it. Blue," he added, with the reluctant accuracy of the practical. Miss Harper set down the coffee pot very carefully. The china made the smallest sound as it met the tray. Lady Helena's hand went once to her throat and stayed there. We went together. Jarvis led, careful not to stride, through the side door and along the boundary, where the roses lay heavy on their stems. At the loosened place in the yew, He crouched, and with a gentleness that was almost reverence, parted the living green. The ring lay there in a tiny cradle of resin and twig, a gold oval with the engraved crest dull with the film of sap. A sliver of pale blue clung at the inner curve like a petal. Kershaw made a satisfied sound and looked not at Poirot, but at Miss Harper. Poirot, who had looked first at the hedge and only after at the ring, spoke almost to Jarvis. "You have not touched it?" "No, sir. 'Twasn't for me to meddle." "Then, Inspector, with your permission," Poirot said, and with his handkerchief lifted the ring. He did not clean it. He turned it in the light and observed a fine, fresh scratch across the flatness of the crest, very slight, running true from west to north, as a needle might have gone. His mouth softened. "Bon," he murmured. "This ring has seen the brass plate in the centre. It has made a kiss at the west point. So, our friend leans, he touches, he scratches. Later, perhaps, he removes. But it is not the removal that interests me. It is the passing. Jarvis, which side of the panel does this place lie? Ours or the other?" "On our side," Jarvis said promptly. "You'd pass from north to west, hand through this way, if you knew where to aim. If you weren't certain, you'd scrabble a bit and catch yourself, there where it is." "Just so." Poirot's eyes went to Miss Harper, who had come steadfastly to see what might decide her, and then to Reeves, who had not wished to come, and had come anyway, and now stood with that particular stillness that comes when a man suppresses the impulse to put something straight. "You see, Inspector," he said softly, "if Mademoiselle had taken the ring, she would have taken it away. Mademoiselle does not hide trinkets in hedges. She burns her embarrassments. She does not deck the bushes with them like a May-Day." Kershaw's jaw worked. He is not a stubborn man. He is a man who dislikes being hurried past a door he had thought was the right one. "Then who?" "The person who knows the place of the panel," Poirot said, "and who thinks better, with every step, of what he has in his hand. He is a tidy man. He dislikes the weight of a jewel in his pocket when he goes indoors to wash the stick. He is precise. He will return for it at his leisure. It will wait because hedges are patient." He lifted the sliver of blue with a fingernail and placed it beside the ring on the handkerchief. "Paper is less patient. It clings only where there is sap. We will see later whether it mates with a blue that burns very nicely in the library." He turned, and for the first time in all that little pageant, there was the smallest iron in his tone. "Inspector, you will do me the kindness to confirm with the telegraph office, to whom a message went at 10:20 yesterday and today from Mr. Reeves's hand. You will also ask him to show you his pocket-book. He will give it willingly, because he is offended that you should imagine he loses things. And now, breakfast will be entirely spoiled unless we forbid the kitchen to punish us for being late. Later, there is a promenade I think we will all enjoy. We will walk to the centre and stand there and listen to the clock." We returned, carrying the little handkerchief bundle like a sacrament. Lady Helena took one look at the ring and turned away, not with weakness, but with a kind of refusal that was at once dignified and entirely human. Basil said, with an attempt at bravado that did him no good, "Charles never could keep a ring where it belonged," and then, encountering his cousin's widow's profile, went very quiet. Miss Harper's eyes dropped. Her hands were still. Reeves, who had taken up his coffee cup without tasting it, set it down untasted. The saucer kissed the porcelain. "Mr. Reeves," Kershaw said, in a voice that was officially genial, "you'll oblige me with your pocket-book after breakfast, and later a moment at the office. No harm in tidiness." "None," Reeves agreed, and almost smiled. "I applaud it." It was after this that Poirot made his little promenade, not to the centre, as he had promised, but by way of the study. He asked for the telegram again. He placed the ring beside it, and for a moment the three of us, Poirot, Kershaw, and I, looked down upon the three things, as if they were the 3 points by which a small, miserable compass would show us where to go. Poirot's finger hovered over the blotter where the faint brown smear had been. He did not touch it. "You will see," he said to Kershaw, "that at 10 last night our tidy friend adjusted the stand in the cloakroom and moved a little ticket. At 7 this morning he placed upon the marble a note with 5 words and a pin. He is too clean to leave the note in his pocket and too proud to bring it openly. He wishes to direct our eyes to warning. It is the word one uses when one thinks he has done a good thing and it has gone wrong. It is also the word of a person who has frightened a man into a place the man disliked going and believes himself benevolent because he believed the fright would save, not kill. We shall see." "Frightened?" I said. "Mais oui," said Poirot. "One does not entice a man like Sir Charles into a nest he dislikes with the promise of a kiss. One suggests a danger to the thing he values more. One suggests a threat to money that keeps the house upright, to honor that keeps the house proud. One pins in the center a little paper that says, perhaps, 'You are watched,' or 'Do not sign,' and one waits in the shade and listens to the quarter chime like a clock in a pocket. The heart, it makes a jump, the foot slips, the stick falls, and then a very tidy person smooths the gravel and washes his hands." He stopped himself with a little gesture of disgust, not for the person, for the complacency of the picture. "We do not conclude," he said. "We make our lines. We do not yet draw the figure. Come, if we stand at the center, the echo will show us whether a man waited close or far." We went back into the green. The card flecks of yesterday still marked a method among the bewilderments. "At the false center," Basil said, with a show of amusement. "Ah, the sundial," and Poirot glanced at him and said nothing, which altered Basil's gait more than any rebuke. In the true center, Poirot set the ring upon the brass plate, so that the fine scratch lay exactly on the west point, and the engraved crest looked up like a face turned from us. He stood with his back to the south entrance, and closed his eyes a moment. The silence there has a shape. It is as if a bell had been rung, and is waiting to be rung again. When the church far off chimed the quarter, the sound came as the boy had said it would, faintly, like a clock in a pocket. "You hear?" Poirot said. "If one stands here at 10:42, one hears that. If one stands at the panel, one hears it a count later. The person who was waiting at the panel will tell it in his tongue, without knowing. Presently we will ask him to tell his morning to us, and he will say, 'At the quarter I heard,' and he will betray the place from which he heard. That is a little amusement I reserve for myself." He took up the ring again and slipped it into the handkerchief, which he folded once more into its square. "Now, we return. We admire files." In the library, Reeves had anticipated us and stood, not behind the table with his blue file. He is too careful of appearances to put himself figuratively on the other side, but at one corner, like a host. Poirot, with every appearance of good humour, opened the cover and turned the neat leaves. He did not pounce. He admired. He paused at the draft clause concerning the right-of-way, and glanced up. "It is crisp," he said. "Not Sir Charles's hand. Yours?" "Briefly," Reeves said. He disliked the phrasing of the company's solicitor. We differed on one point. He proposed to put it more plainly to Mrs. Barclay. I penned a draft and left it for his approval. "And at 10:20? Poirot said, as if asking for the recipe of a pudding. "You sent a telegram to the company? What words?" Reeves's lids lowered a fraction. "I ask if Mr. Poirot has already spoken to the post office." "I ask," Poirot returned, "because we shall in any case. But I can guess your message. Hold. Do nothing. Sir Charles to write." "It is not wicked," he added, with that terrible kindness that exposes the shame in people, better than anger. "It is tidy. It keeps business in order. while the heart wanders in the garden. Reeves's mouth moved. For the first time there was the barest mark of strain at the corners. "You make too much of these small appliances," he said. "Pins and papers. The man died of his heart in a place he did not like. It is tragic. It is not criminal to keep his business straight." "Pins and papers," said Poirot softly, "and soap, and a ring, and a note that says warning. It is a house of small things, Monsieur Reeves. I am a small man. I find it congenial. Presently, we will ask you also for the coat you wore yesterday morning, for the cuff that rests against marble, and leaves on it the faintest mark, when a man who dislikes smutch rubs where no smutch is. And then, then, we will all go to the potting shed, and we will ask the wood there whether it remembers the weight of a man who does not often visit it." Reeves lifted his chin 1/4 of an inch. "This is offensive." "It is accurate," Poirot replied, with a bow as courteous as insult could bear. "But do not distress yourself. I have not accused you. I have accused nothing but tidiness. The law is large. It will sort our laundry later." We had not long to wait for the law's next parcel. A scuffle of small boots in the passage, the shock-headed boy again, knocking on the door-jamb as if imploring permission of it. "Beg pardon, sir," he said to Kershaw, and then, because Poirot's attention warms even the shy to Poirot as well. "But I went, like you said, to listen in the centre, and then to the hedge. And when I was by the panel, I heard the quarter after, not with the chime, but a count later, and there was, if you please, this stuck in the leaves." He held out, on a grubby palm, the head of a brass paper pin, bent precisely as the little pin from the centre had been bent. Poirot took it, and smiled a very small smile. "Voilà," he said. "The maze is a very tidy desk." He lifted his head, and his eyes went not to Miss Harper, not to Basil, but to Reeves. "Monsieur, will you tell me, to save your dignity later, whether this morning when you stood in the cloakroom, you attempted past your principles to make clean with your own cuff a small imaginary mark? You see, the paper under the door remembers a circle as of a ring, the ring that is not on your hand." He paused, and his voice lost all play. "Or will you wait, and let me go to the village to fetch the telegram clerk, who will tell me with a face that lights up like a boy's that you write like a general, in straight lines, and that you sent at 10:20 a message that is not to the Quarry Company at all, but to a number in town that belongs to a clubman who wants his money back?" The room did not breathe. Reeves' hand went, with the faintest impatience at theatricality, to his pocketbook. He opened it, as if one must open something when a magician asks for it. The skin over the bones of his face looked briefly too tight. "You are tiresome, Mr. Poirot," he said, "but you are not entirely wrong." "Alas," said Poirot with real sadness, "I am so often right in the most tiresome ways. Now we will go, if you please, to see whether the garden, which you despise, will lend me one more little truth. After that, we will speak in the drawing-room where Madame's portraits look down, and I will hang for you another picture. It will be only a little crooked." Poirot did not hurry the moment. He has a way of letting an hour ripen, as if it were fruit. When Kershaw had pocketed his impatience, and the ring lay folded once more in the square of handkerchief, we went by agreement to the potting shed with Jarvis. It sat snug against the north wall like a thought one puts aside, and returns to when the house is not looking. The air inside was the air of soil and twine and old water. The benches were scarred by small honest violences. The shelf with the balls of string bulged and sagged in the middle with the weight of habits. "Here," Jarvis said, touching the second shelf. "She'd put it behind this bale of raffia. Elsie told me. I don't pry. I keep my shed in order." Poirot's gloved fingertip drew a small arc through the light film of dust on the board, then stopped where the dust broke into clean wood. Somebody else also keeps order, he said. Observe, the shelf is wiped at a width of a hand where one reaches, and not wiped beyond. There is a little thread of blue stuck under the splinter. So, we will offend Jarvis by taking it away. He plucked the filament, held it to the light without triumph, and slipped it into his pocket with the pin's bent brother. A person who despises dirt prefers a clean hiding place. His eye climbed the bench leg, lingered at the brace where a boot had polished the wood into a dull shine, then travelled to the window. "And here, mon ami, is the English improvised ladder," he said to me, his voice all pleasantness. "This brace is rubbed by a shoe that does not belong to a gardener. A gardener does not plant his heel on a joint. He steps where the grain will carry him. A gentleman or a lawyer or a frightened messenger, all of them climb by the wrong place. They reach up to the shelf, not down. They do not live in sheds." Jarvis's mouth compressed. Not at the imputation, at the accuracy. "No gardener climbs there," he conceded. "I'd skin the boy if he did." Poirot's nose lifted a fraction. "Paraffin," he said, very soft. "A little, in the corner there. A spill not mine. Someone thought to burn a paper, and remembered at the last that flame jumps. A tidy man fears scorches more than secrets." He looked at the bench again. A stub of pencil lay secluded by the leg. Black varnish rubbed thin. The lead sharpened with a knife, not a pocket sharpener. It had that ruthlessly even-point men who balance columns prefer. Kershaw reached for it, and then left it where it was, chastened of his reflex. "Ledger pencil," he grunted. "Not a gardener's." "No," said Poirot, "but a lawyer's, and a clerk's, and a club secretary's. We do not accuse a pencil. We let it say that it has visited a potting shed. There was no drama to be found there, only the slow perfume of confirmation. Poirot did not add to it. He asked Jarvis to leave the place exactly so. He straightened a small pot with 2 fingers, and then left it askew again, the smallest provocation to any hand that could not tolerate it. At the door, a panting boy in an ill-fitting jacket arrived with a cap in his fist, and a pride he was too proper to show. "From the Telegraph, sir," he said to Kershaw, and then to Poirot, because Poirot's attention is wealth. "Mr. Reeves sent yesterday at 10:20 to London Club. Message says, 'Hold, no action, will remit on Monday.' This morning, same time, 'Indisposed, do not come to Hall.' Clerk says same hand. He keeps the figures upright, sir." "Bien," said Poirot gently. "You see, Inspector," our tidy friend did not wish the club friend to arrive, and ask Sir Charles for his money in the presence of a lease that would tell its own tale. He did not wish it yesterday. He wished it still less today. He sends one message to keep the world from intruding while he keeps the house clean. It is not malice, it is method. Method kills when it forgets that hearts are not files. We went back out into the whitening air. The maze lay to the right, its lips pursed. Poirot did not look at it. He looked at the house, and at the particular window of the study, and at the north passage, where the cloakroom door kept its counsel. In the hall, he asked Dobson for a small indulgence. "Be so kind," he said, "as to place a carafe and 2 glasses on the table in the centre of the drawing-room, where there is the little table that is an island, do you see, which makes people walk around. Also, since we are friends of order, let the chairs be a degree not straight, not crooked, no, a degree only. I wish to see which pair of eyes suffer." "Very good, sir," Dobson said, without a flicker to betray that he understood more than the words. Poirot sent then for Miss Harper. He asked her for a favour that was also a test, because with him kindness and theatre are cousins. "Mademoiselle, you will write for me, on the blue paper you use for personal notes, the words, 'It was a warning. Forgive me. I am rude. I ask much. It is so that I may sleep, you see, without scruples.'" She looked at him full for the first time that morning. and I thought that if one drew a blade across water, it would make a sound like her voice then. If you think I wrote that, she said, write it yourself. Poirot bowed. It is exactly what I wished you to say. Go, rest. Before noon, we will ask you for another little courage. It will be the last. At 11, the house gathered in the drawing-room with that formality, which is not pomp, but defence. Light spilled in measured rectangles. Portraits looked on, their grave faces a kind of counsel. Lady Helena took a place not central but commanding by the window. Basil drifted to the fireplace where reflections make handsome men handsomer. Major Fitzroy stood because standing is a habit and a doctrine. Reeves placed himself at the corner of the island table with the carafe, and did not notice that he had chosen a place where one must go around rather than across. Inspector Kershaw waited with his notebook unopened, as if it would be indelicate to take the first liberty. Poirot did not take the middle. He placed himself where he could see all the faces and the misaligned chairs. He made a little business with his cuff, and then, because he loves his drama simple, he spoke without preliminaries. There is in this affair, he said, a person who believes himself benevolent. He thinks he warned a man in a way that would save him from a mistake. The man went instead to the place he disliked and died there. The benevolent person is not a murderer in the sense of intention. He is a murderer in the sense of result. He set a scene, very neatly. A note pinned, perhaps, in the centre of the maze upon the brass where the compass rose sits, a message that says, "Do not sign, or you are watched." Something to frighten Sir Charles away from a signature. He waits at the panel like a schoolmaster, to collect the paper again when the lesson is done. The ring catches, the scratch is made, the quarter chimes like a clock in a pocket. The generous heart fails under the little jolt of fear. And then the benevolent man does what he always does. He tidies. He smooths the gravel with the stick. He washes his hands. He removes the ring so that the message shall not look like the trick it is. He hides the ring in the hedge to fetch later, and forgets that the hedge keeps secrets badly. He writes to us in the morning that it was a warning and asks forgiveness, so that he may forgive himself. Voilà. Silence took the room by the shoulders. In the lack of breathing, one becomes aware of small things. The slow percolation of a clock. The avenue's leaves discoursing in a language one does not speak. Basil made a movement and stopped. He had been robbed in an instant of his utility as a suspect, and did not know how to occupy his hands. Reeves said very quietly, "You have a taste, Mr. Poirot, for morality plays. It flatters the audience to sit in judgment. You will have a villain who is not, and a simple ending to cover complex matters. Sir Charles was not frightened by paper. He was frightened by years of a heart that did not like to be hurried." "Ah," said Poirot, all sympathy. "But he was hurried, by a person who does not like to be hurried himself. That is the sin you cannot admit, monsieur. Untidiness done in the name of tidiness. You cannot bear that the picture is crooked by your hand." Reeves' mouth tightened. "You have evidence?" he asked Kershaw, not Poirot, not deigning to make a debate of style, the equal of fact. Kershaw was honest. "We have the ring scratched on the west point and found at the panel. We have the blue paper thread in the shed. We have the boy's pins. We have your telegrams at 10:20. We will have your cuff to see if there's soap where a ring lies when one rubs a mark that isn't there. We've no witness saw you with the deceased." Poirot lifted his hand, not to interrupt Kershaw, but with that small proprietary motion with which one rights a small disorder. "We have also," he said, "the way a person tells his time." "Major, at 10 yesterday, where were you?" "In the gun-room." "And did you hear the quarter after?" "Number stone walls. You don't hear much unless you want to." "Monsieur Corwen, at 10? "In the maze, briefly, and then the rose walk. I heard the quarter under the trees as one hears gossip, distant and harmless." Mademoiselle Harper, at 10:42. In my room, she said. Her voice stood. If I heard it, I did not note it. And you, Monsieur Reeves, where were you at the 10:15? You told Inspector Kershaw earlier that you walked as far as the North Passage to find the cloakroom empty and then returned to the study. I said no such thing, Reeves replied, still even, but a muscle at the jaw choosing that moment to take offence. I sent the boy to fetch Sir Charles at 11. You see, he does not say I heard the quarter from the panel and counted one, Poirot said, almost tenderly. He does not say I heard it late, as one hears a clock in a pocket. He has heard me say it, and he will not put his foot in the shape I have drawn. It is his right. But the hedge tells the truth for him. The pin in the leaves. It waits one count later for the boy. The ring. Ah, the ring is our little saint in this story. It will not suffer to be set in the wrong shrine. It scratches where one leans upon the brass, and then whispers to us from the hedge that a precise hand was clumsy for once. You have not asked me, Lady Helena said, and the blade of her H glinted in the room. Shall I tell you where I was at the 15:15? At my dressing table, counting the exact number of strokes it takes to draw a woman's hair into a knot. I did not hear the chime. I do not hear chimes when I have decided not to. It is why you are not suspected, madame, Poirot said, and there was admiration there not even he could make academic. You do not apologize for being yourself. Guilt apologizes in advance, with little notes that say, "Forgive me." Reeves's composure did not break. It altered. He stepped a fraction from the island table, changed the relation of his body to the misaligned chairs, and placed the carafe in the exact center of the mat, because some inner instruction could not bear to leave it off. He faced Kershaw. You will do as you think right, he said. I did not push Sir Charles. I did not poison him. I did not mean him harm. I placed a paper in a childish place to alarm him enough to listen to reason. He was stubborn. He would have signed a clause that gave a woman who cannot manage her staff a right of way through which a quarry may later claim a route for lorries. I thought to stop him with a trick. It was a lawyer's trick, not a felon's. He died, yes, but not by my hand. Kershaw glanced at Poirot. The law cares about the hand and the intent, he said. It has a place also for what follows intent when a sensible man ought to foresee harm. You used that panel. You set the stage. You took the ring. Why? Reeves looked at the ring in Poirot's folded handkerchief with an honest distaste. Because it made the scene look like a lover's theatre. I preferred business to farce, he said. And the note this morning? Poirot asked, very mild. Why did you bring yourself to write those 5 words? Reeves's gaze slid, not to Miss Harper, whom a lesser man would have offered up, but to the portraits, to the larger argument. Because I am not a coward, he said. Because I thought, if I am to be blamed for what I meant to avert, I will at least make plain the intent. Poirot inclined his head. That was the first tidy thing you have done that I admire, but it does not clean the rest. He turned a fraction, and his voice took on again the softness he bears for the truly innocent. Mademoiselle Harper, you have carried other people's messages with a courage that is habit. You are done. You will not be asked to carry any more. I carried because it was asked of me, she said, without self-defense. And you will be asked no longer, Poirot said. Monsieur Reeves, will you do the other tidy thing? Will you, without making Inspector Kershaw fetch his clerk and his little boy to humiliate you, give him the coat you wore yesterday, the shirt with the faint mark where a ring presses, the keys to the shed you pretended not to know, and the drafts in your desk which show that the clause that offended Sir Charles was not the company's but yours? He did not move his chin. His eyes alone did the lifting. It will save Madame the fatigue of seeing the drawers opened in her house. Reeves took a breath, let it out, and in that small act one could see a man evaluating cost. He nodded once. "You shall have the coat," he said, "and the drafts. I do not promise the mark. I wash my shirts. You will not find me ashamed of that." Kershaw looked almost relieved to be given the practical things his hands know. "I'll take your statement," he said, professional again. "We may have to put a name to it besides tidy. There's manslaughter when a warning sets a trap, and there's obstruction when one clears what ought to be left. We'll see." "You will forgive me one more small play," Poirot said. He took from his pocket the other blue fragment and the tiny bent pin, and laid them by the ring upon the island table. "We found these where people who love order might not look, under leaves, under dust. They make the picture, but there is one corner that is still not straight. There is the clubman." "Latham," Reeves said at once, almost with gratitude, as if at last the thing could be called what it was. "He lent Sir Charles a sum years ago. He asked tactfully for return. I sent to hold him off. He would have embarrassed us all." "Embarrassment," Poirot murmured, "has killed as many as intention." His gaze went to Lady Helena. "Madame, you are very brave. It remains only to tell you that Sir Charles died not with deceit in his heart, but with anxiety. He went to the centre because he thought someone watched his honour. I think he was angry for a moment, angry enough to lay his hand hard against the brass and scratch the ring. Then the quarter came, and his heart, mon Dieu, the poor instrument. It is often so. The little sound that is nothing to one man is to another the blow." "Thank you," Lady Helena said. It was not the words. It was the way she lifted her chin across them. "It is good to know what a man meant, even if he did not do it." Poirot bowed as one bows at the end of a minuet. "We will let Inspector Kershaw make his arrangements," he said. "Later, if you permit, we will set the chairs straight again together." As Kershaw drew Reeves aside with a tact that did him credit, Basil, whose occupation had been to be superfluous, came to Miss Harper with a morality his manner tried to make light. "If I ever ask you to reach through a hedge again," he said, "you must slap me." "Do not," she answered, and because she said it without heat, it was heavier than anger. Basil coloured, and at last found use for his hands. He put one chair very carefully to rights, and stepped back from it as if it might accuse him. Poirot's eyes followed the small restitution with contentment. "You see, mon ami," he murmured to me, "everyone must straighten at least one chair. It is how the English make peace with the day. For us, there is a little thing remaining, the boy and the centre. I would like him to tell me again how the quarter sounds from there. I am vain. I like to hear that I have counted correctly." But we had scarcely reached the door when Jarvis appeared once more, his cap crushed in his hand, his face uncharacteristically upset, out of shape. "Sir," he said to Poirot, and this time he did not preface it with "beg pardon." "The centre. There's something more at the centre. It weren't there yesterday. There's words on the brass. Scratched in. Faint, but there. I wouldn't have seen it if the sun hadn't took it just so." Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "Voilà," he said, and his voice had pleasure and gravity together. When one straightens a crooked picture, sometimes one sees the mark it has left on the wall. We went at once, a small party lengthening and contracting as corners allowed. Jarvis ahead, with that careful haste of a man who will not let alarm make him clumsy. Kershaw, with his jaw set against being hurried into error. Poirot, neat as ever, and I trying not to race. The maze received us without comment. Our paper flecks still marked yesterday's progress, like discreet visiting cards announcing that reason had been here and would return. At the centre, the brass plate wore a light different from the morning's. Sun slightly higher, the hedge a shade more open in its green. Jarvis bent, touched the rim with a knuckle, and pointed at the lower quadrant. "There," he said, low, as one speaks in church. "I'd not swear to my mother's life, sir, but I'd swear to my work. That wasn't cut when I polished Saturday, nor when we come with you yesterday. I'd have seen it even in poor light. But now the sun catches there. It was not obvious until one made the eye obey. Then, once seen, one could not unsee it. 4 words, ghost faint, scratched with a small, stubborn point, so that the letters had no depth, only a glimmering rawness against the mellow brass. The hand, if one can speak of a hand when the instrument is a pin, had kept close to the circumference, where the metal lies flattest. The phrase ran from west toward north, cramped to fit the curve. You are watched. Kershaw breathed out through his teeth. Well, that's plain enough, he said, though he did not sound pleased, and not the boy's fancy. Poirot did not answer at once. He stood with his head a little to one side, then knelt, and for the second time that day I watched the odd dignity of his exactness when dealing with the floor. He took from his pocket a small strip of white paper and held it just over the scratch, so that the sun, striking the paper, washed the letters with a soft light that made the burrs stand up. He did not touch the plate. He only looked, and then he looked at the gravel immediately adjacent. I followed his glance and saw, at the very margin where gravel meets metal, 2 or 3 dust-fine glitters caught between grains. Very new, he said softly. Brass shows its wound before it learns to hide it. Also, regard, Inspector, the direction. He traced in the air, not on the plate, the motion of the strokes, the down of the Y, a little heavier where it begins, thinning where it lifts, the cross of the A cut from right to left, not left to right, the upright of the T graven with a tiny hook at its foot, where the point had bitten as it came toward the writer. A right-handed person, he went on, standing here. He placed his shoes at the north side of the plate, so that his toes almost kissed the rim, and writing toward himself will make the burr lie a little to the south, but this burr lies to the north and west. The writer, right-handed, stood there. He moved to the southwest position, where a man could face the north entrance and the little treacherous panel, and wrote in the air again, so that I could see the movement without seeing the act. He writes inward. He pulls the point down to himself. Voila. And now, what small instrument does this? He stepped back. Inspector, you will indulge me a foolishness. From my pocket I take, what? A paper pin head that the boy gave me from the hedge. And here, he produced it, is its little cousin that I took yesterday from the centre. And here, he added, glancing at me with a spark of mischief, is one more pin I have stolen from the tin which our Ami Reeves left upon my table like a compliment. He held them one by one close to the light, not to us, then set the third, the unbent pin, against the underside of the brass rim, where no mark would show, and drew it, very gently, a hair's breadth. The sound it made, if sound it was like a mouse climbing a curtain. It is possible, he said mildly, to write with such a pin. It is also possible to pin a paper upon this plate, and to write beneath it, so that when one removes the paper, one leaves behind the whisper of the words, a little reassurance. You are watched, should the first paper be lost. He glanced at Jarvis's honest distress and softened his voice. Do not be troubled, my friend. The brass is old. It keeps both kisses and scratches. We only ask it what it remembers. Kershaw crouched in his turn and grunted. New, I'll grant. The burr's bright, and damned small. Beg pardon, my lady, he added reflexively to the air, and then looked around, as if surprised to find no ladies present. When was this done? Yesterday? This morning? Before, said Poirot. Before we came the first time, or after we left yesterday. I do not think so. I would have seen even this little thing. It is my vanity. No, this was done between our promenade this morning and Jarvis's coming now. The sun shows it because the cut is fresh. Already the air has taken a little of the brilliance away. Also, do not forget, the boy brought me just now another bent pin from the panel. Our tidy friend, who likes to retrieve what he plants, comes to take away the writing he fears, and cannot help but make more. Kershaw's eyes went to the paths like a hound checking the direction of wind. Then he's been in here since we left the drawing-room? It is not necessary that he came all the way to the centre, Poirot replied. See where the words end? At the north, close to the edge. One can reach just if one has a little tool and a little vanity, but I think he came. Tidy people do not like to work at bad angles. We left the plate untouched and withdrew. On the way out, near the false centre with the quatrefoil, Poirot's cane found, with that faint, infuriating inevitability of his, another tiny thing, the smallest curl of brass, barely a comma, caught in a notch in the gravel where a heel had pressed it in. He lifted it and set it upon his handkerchief beside the ring, as if presenting two unimportant guests to one another. "Come," he said, very content. "I have my one more little truth. The rest we will leave to the room with the portraits. It is time to be theatrical." On the terrace we met Lady Helena, who had come out not in impatience, but in that way some people have of reducing the need for footsteps to the minimum. She looked from one face to another, and accepted what she found. "It says something on the plate," she said. "Jarvis told me." "It does," said Poirot. "It says that we have the habit, madame, of thinking we are unseen when we do tidy things. Will you permit in 10 minutes that we all assemble again?" She inclined her head. "You will not be indulgent," she said, "not to him, to the day." "No," Poirot answered, and it was almost gentle. Back in the drawing-room, he did not take up a position. He made one. The carafe sat in the centre, where Reeves had placed it. 2 chairs were still a hair not straight. Basil, unable to help himself, had set one to rights earlier, and stood now with his fingers on the back of the other, as if waiting to be told whether virtue required it. Miss Harper had the steadiness that comes the hour after fear has found its limit. Major Fitzroy had moved to a place where he could see both door and window. Reeves, with Kershaw near him, had the careful stillness of a bridge player who is not resigned, but is prepared. "You will endure me a short parable," Poirot said. "Monsieur Reeves believes he warned Sir Charles. He placed a paper, pinned with a little brass pin, perhaps here," he touched the carafe's mat, "upon a plate at the centre of a maze, because he could not bear that a clause in a lease should be badly written. He did not intend death, he intended obedience. But when death came, he could not bear disorder. He smoothed the gravel, he carried away the ring, he washed the ferrule of the stick, he sent the boy to the doctor. These are already too many things. This morning he did one thing more. He wrote for us a little inscription, 'You are watched,' with a pin, upon the brass. Not in the night, he is not romantic, but in the late morning when the house was occupied and people's habits could be predicted. The burr is bright, the curl of brass is new. The strokes show where he stood, and because he could not keep from himself the pleasure of tools, he has left upon my table a tin of paper pins, as if to offer me the means by which he made his sign." He lifted the handkerchief fold, revealed for a moment the faint glitter of the curled shaving and the ring, then closed it again. Reeves did not wince. "Mr. Poirot," he said evenly, "if you can make a statute that punishes inscriptions, you are more of a lawmaker than Parliament. I am guilty of tidying, if you insist. I do not repent of it. Sir Charles was a good man, and an obstinate one. I frightened him, yes, with the words, 'You are watched.' I intended to frighten him. If that is a confession, take it." "It is the confession I require," Poirot returned. "Not to hang you. I am not your hangman. To set in order what a man meant, and what he did, and what happened because between meaning and doing there is a maze." He looked to Kershaw. "Inspector, you will put your charge in the language your books approve. Mine is different. But before you are practical, indulge me one more foolishness." He asked the boy to be brought, and when the lad stood there, Awkward and proud, Poirot spoke to him as he might have spoken to a choir boy on Sunday. "You went for me to the centre. You heard the quarter like a clock in a pocket. When you stood by the panel, how long between the sound at the centre and the sound there?" The boy, who had practised the answer in the gravel, did not stumble. "Count, sir. 1. Centre goes ding, panel goes ding, like that." He demonstrated, earnest and unself-conscious. "You see," said Poirot softly, "the hedge tells whether one waited close or far. Monsieur Reeves speaks much of principle. He does not like to speak of place." Kershaw nodded, his face more austere than exultant. "We've place enough," he said, "and the rest." He turned to Reeves. "We'll put it as manslaughter by an unlawful act, setting a trap that a reasonable man would think dangerous, and with interference after. You can have your solicitor. You'll not go far in the meantime." Reeves looked for the first time, not at us, but at Lady Helena. "It is not justice to call this the same as a blow," he said. "It is not," she replied, "but it is nearer to a blow than to a kindness." She did not look away until he did. Poirot drew a breath and let it go, and the inward spring of attention I had felt in him all morning relaxed a notch. He turned to Miss Harper. "Mademoiselle," he said, "you have a brother who will have the money he needs. The lease will be renewed, but written properly. Madame will not have lorries at her hedge. This is the advantage of a crooked picture. When one sets it straight, one may also choose the wall." His eyes warmed. "You will do one thing for me. No more messages through hedges. If a man wishes to speak to you, he will knock at the door, or he will not speak." She coloured, not with shame, with the suddenness of being set free of a rule one had not known one was obeying. "I will not carry anyone's courage for them again," she said. "And you, Major," he added, with the affectionate severity he reserves for soldiers and widows, "you will see that this house is quiet for a day. After that, the noise of life may return. For now, order is not a system, it is a kindness." The Major made a sound that was not quite assent and not quite thanks. It was what men make when instructed to guard something they had already decided to guard. Basil, who had been working out how not to be irrelevant, spoke at last with an honest shame that improved him. "I am an ass," he said. "If anyone would like me to be useful, I am prepared to begin at the bottom of the list." "Begin," Lady Helena said, without looking at him. It was enough. It might have ended there, with the law taking charge and the house taking breath, but Poirot cannot resist the last polish, any more than Reeves could. He asked to see the coat Reeves had worn yesterday. Kershaw obliged. The garment was brought. Poirot's small white paper came out again. He tapped the right cuff against it once. A faint golden dust made itself visible, no more than the memory of a thought. "It is not evidence," he said, before anyone could object. "It is only the world agreeing with me." He folded the paper, tucked it away, and turned to Lady Helena. "Madame, will you walk with me one moment? There is a thing at the centre I think you should see with your own eyes." She went with him without words. We, from a compassionate obedience to English delicacy, did not follow. They were gone perhaps 5 minutes. When they returned, her face had altered in no way that a stranger would see, but in every way that those who had watched her all morning could. She took Poirot's hand briefly, so briefly one might have missed it, and then released it. "It is better to know," she said simply. Afterwards, when the business of statements and small humiliations had begun, and the house's attention had at last shifted from us to the practical, Poirot and I stood again at the window. The maze lay with its patient green face. The brass plate at the centre caught the sun and released it, stone by stone. "What words were there?" I asked at last. "Those other words you meant her to see?" "Only you are watched." He smiled a little, the private smile he keeps for human exactitude. "No," he said, Under the words, very faint, older, I think, than this morning, there was another scratch I had not seen until the light turned. Not a word, 2 letters, cut in irritation with a heavy ring. They will mean nothing to the inspector. They mean everything to Madame. Huh. And then the beginning of another stroke. He began to write her initial as men do when they are angry and ashamed and wish to accuse and cannot. He stopped. He did not accuse her. It is good for her to know that he had, even in anger, that courtesy. It is why she can eat tonight. He turned then, with that French little lift of the shoulders, that is not indifference, but the recognition that one has done what one can. Come, he said. We will have for once a very English luncheon, roast beef, and afterwards we will permit Inspector Kershaw to tell the newspapers whatever satisfies their geometry. For me, there is only one more small necessity. And that? I asked. He smiled. To set the last chair precisely straight. Otherwise, mon ami, I shall dream of it. We had our very English luncheon after all, though Poirot, who professes an affection for roast beef as a national character rather than a dish, applied himself to it with moderation and a severe eye for the horseradish. Lady Helena presided with a composure that did not pretend. She thanked Inspector Kershaw in 3 words, thanked Jarvis in 2, and said to the shock-headed boy, when Dobson shepherded him in embarrassed triumph to the pantry for a hot plate and a half-crown pressed into his hand, "You did well," which was all he will remember when he is old. Reeves remained in a small room off the study, with Kershaw and a constable, the door ajar and the voices very low. It was not quite arrest yet, but the shape of it was there, as a picture one has not hung, but has chosen the nail for. Basil, who had mastered his frivolity into a sort of use, took himself off after the soup, found Miss Harper's brother a specialist in town by telephone, and returned with a seriousness that suited him better than charm. Major Fitzroy supervised nothing, and by that act oversaw everything. The house moved like a regiment at rest. Poirot, who cannot let a thing be complete until he has placed upon it the immaculate dust of explanation, took me to the terrace for coffee, and permitted himself the small vanity of being asked. "You saw it as quickly as this?" I said. "At the cloakroom, the soap, the ferrule, at the hedge with the panel. You had it from the beginning?" "From the beginning, no," he said, spreading his hands. "From the first little curiosity, yes. The man who dislikes the maze goes there. We have at once the arrangement, not the chance. Then the stick. It is absent where it should be, present where it should not. A man dies. Another man thinks of sticks. That is already too tidy. The soap remembers the ring and the ferrule. The blotter remembers the sap. The hedge remembers a hand that prefers not to touch earth. I am not a magician, mon ami. I am a cleaning lady. I look where the dust has been disturbed." He ticked them off, not as a boast, but as a habit of order. The ring missing from the hand, but clinging to the hedge. Bon. The faint crescent pressed under the soap. Why should a man rub there, unless he has a mark to disguise? The little pins, one bent at the centre, one bent at the panel. Pins appear when a person who keeps them in tins has been at play. The blue paper, one fragment in the north path, one thread in the potting shed, one ash in the grate. Voila the ghost of a letter that someone thought would be prettier burned. The chimes, the count of 1 between centre and panel, tell us where the waiting ear stood, and the words written with a pin are the confession in the language of a tidy man who cannot bear to leave the scene without a label. "And the motive," I said. "It was not money for himself." "No," said Poirot, and his tone, which had been light, dropped into that grave kindness, which is not pity. A fear of disorder. He wished to hold off the clubman who would importune the household. He wished to prevent a clause he disapproved. He wished to keep the picture straight. This is the tragedy of such men, when their order becomes another person's fright. He put a little paper in the middle of the maze, to make a gentleman go away from a signature. He forgot that the gentleman's heart is not a file. After, as always, he tidied, he smoothed, he washed, he hid, he forgave. The psychology, it is the only thing that matters. One sees who cannot bear mess, and one asks, what mess would he commit to avoid the greater? We drank our coffee. The maze from the terrace had gone back to being a pattern and not a creature, but I felt toward it the half-superstitious respect one gives to any place where an emotion has paced and left its warmth. Presently, Kershaw came out with the neat fatigue of a man who has put facts into boxes. His pockets contained Reeves's statement in a hand that would draw admiration from clerks, the blue draft with its legal neatness, the cuff sent along for his forensic curiosity if he can find a chemist who will humour him, and the 2 telegram confirmations from the office. He looked at Poirot with a reluctant gratitude. "You, leave me the dull part," he said, not displeased. "I'll call it manslaughter by an unlawful act and see what the lawyers do. He's well connected. They'll push difficult words between him and the dock. But he won't walk away clean. The magistrate will sort the first day. As for the obstruction, the ring, the stick, we'll put it in." Poirot inclined his head. "Do not be too harsh," he said, surprising me. "He is not a wicked man. He is a vain man of a particular virtue. The law will educate him. Life already has." Kershaw nodded. "That's as may be. Lady Helena?" "In very good order," Poirot said and smiled. "She has chosen not to hear the chimes." We made a small progress then. Jerry the boy was thanked again, and given the afternoon off, with an instruction from Jarvis to keep his feet out of the pond, whereupon he went to the pond immediately and kept his feet resolutely on the bank. Basil volunteered himself to drive Mrs. Barclay a letter concerning the right-of-way, and returned with the report that she had received him as an errand, not a guest, which did him good. Miss Harper went to write 2 notes, one to withdraw a blue that had kept her up at night, and one to say plainly what before she had hidden in hedge and shed. Major Fitzroy vanished somewhere useful. Dobson set the library clock to the right second against a pocket watch, and thereby restored the breathing of the house. Poirot's last little necessity, the chair, he reserved until we were almost at the door. He walked back into the drawing-room with a deliberation that made Lady Helena, who saw him pass, lift an eyebrow that was not impatience. He set his hand to the chair Basil had put right, and moved it the 1/4 inch, still wanting. Then he stood a moment and looked at the room as a man looks at a puzzle completed, not because it is solved, but because its pieces fit. He came out with a profound contentment, possible only to men who have achieved, if not justice, then alignment. It would have been a graceful end to the affair to go at once. Poirot, however, cannot resist a farewell that includes the element of instruction. He asked for 10 minutes more with Lady Helena in the morning-room, and spoke to her there not as a detective, but as a respecter of households. "Madame," he said, "permit that I am indelicate. The maze. It is handsome. It is also the instrument of a foolishness. You will do as you please. If you keep it, do not keep the panel. Close it as one closes a book one has read. If you remove it, do not leave the ghost, a ragged place where rabbits and boys will make their own panels. Jarvis knows. He will make a straight cut and plant roses where the mouth was. You will decide. Either way, you will be obeyed." She listened, head bent a fraction, as if to music that requires the same muscles as arithmetic. "I shall not keep a toy that has been used," she said after a moment. "Jarvis will take it out a panel at a time and plant the new yew where the old ends, and next year no one will be able to say where the wrong door was. I will not have children learning the habit of reaching through." "It is exactly said," Poirot answered. "And the lease, you will let the words be written not by passion, but by competence. Mrs. Barclay will be consulted, not coerced. The cart track will not widen itself by accident." She allowed herself the smallest of smiles. "I shall require Mr. Reeves's firm to furnish another solicitor," she said. "Competence is never offended." We took our leave later in the afternoon, when the sun had softened and the bees had begun to take seriously their business in the borders. Basil shook Poirot's hand, with a gratitude that included the relief of being set a task and not a pose. He murmured something about London and amendments to a life. "Begin with paying for something dull," Poirot advised, as if instructing a penitent to say his prayers. "It is the only discipline that lasts." Miss Harper met us in the hall, with a composure that was not the old restraint. "My brother will have what he needs," she said simply. "Lady Helena tells me to rest for a month, and then return if I wish. I think I shall wish. There is a difference between being quiet and being silent. I have learned it." "It is a very good lesson," Poirot said, bowing. "It does not undo, it arranges." At the last, as Dobson shut the car door and Jarvis touched his cap with a hand that had acquired by some grace of afternoon the freest ease I had seen in him, the shock-headed boy ran up with the fierce politeness of the proud. "Sir," he blurted to Poirot, "it were true, weren't it, about the clock in the pocket? I counted it proper." "It was true," said Poirot, "and the boy will remember that sentence longer than his half-crown." We went down the lime avenue. Beyond the curve, Greythorn Hall flattened to its dignities, and the maze, a green script written on ground, disappeared. On the train, Poirot arranged his valise like a sermon, and after the second tunnel, permitted himself the luxury of thought. He does not smoke. He shaves thought as other men shave tobacco, very smooth and very close. I let him be, and watched fields behave themselves toward evening. When he spoke, it was not to preen. "There is a thing the English do very well," he said. "They forgive intention, and they punish disorder. It is sensible. It is also dangerous. Our Monsieur Reeves trusted that the first would save him from the second. But order requires honesty at the beginning, not tidiness at the end." "You are not sorry for him?" I asked. "I am sorry for them all," he said. "For Sir Charles, who wished to be good and was afraid. For Madame, who must carry the strictness of her letter H with grace. For Mademoiselle, who carried courage for others, until she forgot to keep a little for herself. And for Reeves, yes, he had a virtue. He made of it a vice. Mon cher, it is always thus. Excess is only virtue that has lost its manners." He closed his eyes for a minute, opened them to set his cuff to rights, and smiled. "Also, I am sorry for the brass. It will carry the scratch a long time. But Madame will not polish it out. She will know where to stop. That is a rare art, the art of not tidying a thing into a lie." We came into town with the day beginning its slow turn toward lamps. At Paddington, the porter with the large opinions appeared at once as if he had been summoned by our thoughts. Poirot gave him directions that would have satisfied a general. Before we parted, he had one last aphorism to lay gently upon the affair, as a cloth is laid over a sleeping child. "You see," he said, "the maze, it is beautiful, but it makes a promise it cannot keep. It says, 'There is a centre, and there is a way out, and both are the same for everyone.' It is not true. For the heart, there is no map. One must invent the plan each time, and each time a man thinks he can borrow another man's plan, there is danger. Better to knock at the door and say what you mean, n'est-ce pas? It takes longer than a hedge, it is less neat, it is safer." He tipped his hat to the evening like a conspirator, and went on, in that dapper, precise way of his, toward a dinner he would complain of, and finish entirely. I watched him go and thought that if the world were a little tidier where it matters, and a little untidier where it does not, there would be fewer mazes and fewer scratches on brass. And then, because even sentiment must be kept in order, I went in to find a taxi. We did not part after that as strangers depart. One does not step away from a house that has had its heart examined without making, however briefly, a courtesy to its quiet. Poirot slept that night at his little flat with the contentment of a man who has put away his tools in their proper drawers. The next morning, Before my second cup of coffee, he received 2 letters and a parcel, each one the punctuation a story earns when it has stopped telling itself and must be written down. Inspector Kershaw's hand was as practical as his footfall. He wrote that Reeves had given his statement, that the magistrate had set the expected conditions, and that counsel would argue what counsel always argues when intent must be made to sit in a chair it does not like. For my part, Kershaw added, and the severity of the line carried in it a fairness one could respect, I do not believe him a cruel man, but I have never yet seen a tidy man who, having made a snarl, could bear to leave it for the law to comb out. He will be punished for that as much as for the first foolishness. There were appended the clerk's neat confirmations of the telegram times and addressees, which pleased Poirot's sense of symmetry more than they informed it. Lady Helena's note was as spare as a good command, a line of thanks to a professional, who had been exact, a second line to say that Jarvis had closed the panel and would take out the maze in stages so that the garden would not feel, all at once, the shock of amputation. He will plant roses, she wrote, where the mouth was. It is as you said. One does not leave a ragged place for rabbits and boys. Then, in a third line that made me see her face as clearly as if I stood before it, please tell the inspector nothing of the faint letters on the brass. They are mine to keep. I shall not polish them away. The parcel was a small, flat weight, wrapped with Dobson's discretion. Within lay a rubbing of the compass plate, the scratch at the west point clear, and folded separately, the tiniest envelope containing a bent pin and a sliver of blue paper, the last of them. For your collection, Dobson had written in that beautiful impersonal hand butlers have that never betrays what they think of human beings. Her ladyship says to tell you that the boy has been set to Jarvis to learn the maze in reverse, i.e., how to take it down. Poirot was very pleased by all of it, and permitted himself the smallest self-indulgence. He set the rubbing on his mantle between 2 absurd china dogs, and stepped back to admire how the geometry made the dogs look, by contrast, almost living. Then he grew grave again. It is a good house, he said. It has learned the difference between polishing and lying. That is a luxury some palaces never achieve. I had, I confess, thought the matter done, but the world, when it has had a fright, often wishes for a little ceremony to turn a page. Greythorne, being English, contrived a quiet one. A week later, we went down again by the comfortable morning train, not summoned, invited. Basil met us at the station with an expression that would have made a mother forgiving. He had shaved himself too carefully and driven more slowly than was necessary. On the way, he told us, awkwardly, earnestly, what a man tells when he is teaching himself not to be charming. I've sent back the debts that were not really mine to keep, he said. You will think me slow. Miss Harper wrote me a list with the exact addresses. The tailor was kind. He will be paid first. I told Lady Helena I should like to be tedious for a year. She said it would make a charming change. Poirot patted his sleeve. Begin with paying for something dull, he said again, and Basil laughed once, ashamed and relieved. The maze, when we came in sight of it, had already begun to be a memory. Jarvis, with that slow decisiveness, which is the only decisiveness the land respects, had taken out the loosened corner and replaced the run with a sober line of turf. Along the wound's edge, stakes marked circles where roses would root. In the centre, the plate lay bare to a sky that seemed larger for lack of hedges peering at it. Lady Helena stood there with Miss Harper. The latter had the unguarded look of someone who has slept well and eaten simply. The former carried in her hand a small cloth and a little bottle of oil she did not intend to use. Only to keep the green from the screws, she said, with the ghost of a smile, not to erase. And to Poirot, without flourish, you will see that the H is still only the beginning. I see it, he said, and the tone contained all the tact in the world. Kershaw had come as well, for business and for the human reason that men like to see how rooms look when they have been set straight. He and Jarvis spoke of the cart track in words that were both law and weather. Mrs. Barclay arrived by the side gate in a hat as uncompromising as her hedge. She carried a paper in which the right-of-way clause had been mended into sense. She read it, line by line, with Poirot's bland patience at her shoulder like a candlestick. "That is the word," she said at the end, tapping a single adjective. "Words are fences as much as hedges. This one will keep out lorries." In the small procession that followed, there were other rituals, each one a little answer to something that had been made to pretend to be larger than it was. Elsie, the girl from the dower house, came to bring back a key she had never taken. Lady Helena told her, in front of witnesses, that she had been wrong to call a warning impertinence. Elsie curtsied without triumph. The boy, dragged into clean boots that wished themselves off, led us, at Poirot's request, by the simplest turns from the terrace entrance to the centre and back again. "There," Poirot said to him at the end, when the boy beamed with the modesty of talent. "You have mapped it so that if ever you find yourself in a mess, you will know to begin with the corners, not the middle." "You make a catechism of gardens," Kershaw observed, not unkindly. "It is better than making a religion of files," Poirot returned, and Kershaw, who is fair, accepted the hit. There remained one small act I did not understand until I saw it done. Lady Helena had on a little tray the ring. Not cleaned, not set like a relic, only freed of the sap, and left to be what it was, before men had forced it to mean more. She took it in her fingers, and without ceremony, slid it onto a square of ribbon that lay ready in the study, behind glass, beside Sir Charles's watch. "Because," she said, when Basil, after a moment, dared to ask, "a house has a memory, and a memory is not an accusation. It is a fact in a frame." After that, the afternoon arranged itself with that naturalness the English manage when they have decided they prefer courtesy to melancholy. Tea appeared where tea ought to appear. Jarvis retired to his future roses. Mrs. Barclay, with a nod that made of hard bargains a compliment, departed by her hedge. The boy escaped to the pond, and did, in fact, keep his feet off the water. Basil found that he could sit for 10 minutes without telling a story that made him heroic. Miss Harper discovered that writing on cream paper in daylight feels different from writing on blue paper in corners. Reeves did not appear. The law had him. No one spoke his name, as if not speaking it would alter the fact, but neither did anyone speak it to make pain into theatre. When at last I asked, low, whether there was news, Kershaw answered in his succinct way. Counsel had advised, the word reckless had been placed next to the word act, and the rest would be a matter of drafts and days. "It will not be a gallows," he said. "It will be a lesson. He can learn. I have seen worse men refuse." There was in him then a dignity I had not looked for in a county inspector, an unwillingness to be grand when the facts did not require grandeur. I thought we should go then. One does not live in other people's endings. But Poirot had held back one ribbon of neatness for himself, and he drew it out now with a little twinkle that sits on him as naturally as a boutonniere. "Madame," he said to Lady Helena, as we stood at last on the terrace, our valises very properly ready to be carried, "you will permit me an impertinence. No, an arrangement. In your drawing-room there is a chair, which is now so straight that even the angels would find it severe. Will you tolerate that it be left a fraction awry?" She looked at him, as a teacher looks at a child who has given, unexpectedly, the perfect wrong answer for the best reason. "Yes," she said, "leave it awry. We must teach the house that a little crookedness can be honest." "It is the most civilized sentence I have heard all week," Poirot said, and bowed as if to a queen. We took the afternoon train. The country unwound itself with that patient indifference fields have to dramas conducted elsewhere. Because I am the kind of man who likes tales to end where they began, I asked him for his last word on mazes. He pretended to think, which is to say he gave the answer time to look as if it had arrived on its own. The maze, he said, is a promise dressed as a game. It says, if you are clever, you will find the center, and if you are patient, you will come out again. But life, mon ami, does not put its letters on brass. It puts them on soap, on cuffs, on little papers that burn too easily. One must not frighten people into being good. One must show them where the door is, and let them knock. There is a difference between order and tidiness. Order is the courage to call a thing by its name. Tidiness is the fear that the name will rumple the tablecloth. He adjusted, with that minute exactitude that soothed him, the crease of his trouser where the sitter's edge had ironed a line, and added, because he is incorrigible, also, there is the roast beef. It is, as you say, an English virtue, but the horseradish, mon Dieu, it is a crime. One must never let zeal overcome taste. When we parted at Paddington, he offered me, with a perfectly serious air, the loan of his rubbing of the brass. To remind you, he said, that even the little grey cells require a small scratch to wake them, and that it is not always the big hammer that makes the bell ring. Then he tipped his hat to the evening and went off at a pace exactly suited to his dignity and his shoe leather. Later, in my own rooms, when the noise of town had pressed itself into a comfortable murmur and the day had gone out of the window like a polite guest, I thought of the 5 words on the blue paper. It was a warning. Forgive me. It is the cry of tidy men everywhere, and not only men. Perhaps we forgive them when the path back is as clear as the path in, and the harm is only to the gravel. But when the heart is in the center, and the chime is about to strike, there is only this. Say what you mean at the door. Do not pin it to a brass plate in the dark. Poirot would put it more neatly. I am content to leave it as a chair a fraction awry in a good room. In the morning I posted Dobson's envelope back with thanks, and kept, for no reason the law would understand, the smallest of the pins. It glints on my desk in certain lights, a reminder that the difference between you are watched and you are seen is the difference between fear and attention. Poirot, no doubt, would prefer to call it an index to character. He is right. He usually is. But I like to think of it as a very small nail upon which a house hung a better picture.